On Ethan's birthday, I prepared a gift for him. A bowl of soup and a table full of delicious dishes. I waited for him for a long time, but he never showed up. The food went cold. Feeling uneasy, I contacted one of his friends, only to find out that Ethan was at Cloud Spring Bar. My heart felt desolate as I numbly stood up and headed there. The private room was filled with colorful lights and loud music. Inside, laughter and chatter echoed as people drank and partied. Both men and women surrounded Ethan. It was his crowd. Just as I was about to push the door open, I paused. The door was slightly ajar, and the voices inside became crystal clear. I overheard one of Ethan's close friends joking, "Ethan, you've been pretending to be mute at home every day. You must be dying inside." A wave of coldness spread through my body. Another person chimed in, "That woman, Sarah, is way too headstrong. If it were me, I wouldn't want to live with her either." "Ethan, how long are you planning to keep up this mute act? It's been 4 years already." I had been so worried about Ethan's health that I rushed over, afraid his drinking would harm him. But now, a buzzing filled my ears, drowning out all other sounds. My legs felt weak, and my palms clenched tightly, my nails digging into my skin just to stop myself from making a sound. Then, the man who was supposed to be mute, Ethan, spoke with a cold, emotionless voice. "It's not about pretending to be mute. I just hate everything related to her." A bitter laugh followed. "She's so foolish. 4 years. And she still hasn't realized I've been faking it all along." "Yeah, Ethan." Another voice said, "You were fine a month after the car accident. Sarah didn't notice a thing. Honestly, if it weren't for Hannah, you wouldn't have had to settle for her." "Let's not talk about Sarah tonight," someone else suggested. "It's Ethan's birthday. After all." Through the small gap in the door, I saw Ethan's face darken as he raised his glass and downed it in one go. Strangely, even from this distance, I could see his reddened eyes through the narrow opening. It was ridiculous. For 4 years, I truly believed Ethan was so traumatized that he'd never speak again. But what did it matter if he couldn't talk? I could. I spent those years talking to him every day, trying to make him smile, sharing every little thing that happened. I cooked for him, cared for him, and nursed him back to health, hoping to someday have a place in his heart. 4 years. Long enough to warm even the coldest stone. But there was one name I never dared to mention, Hannah. Ethan's first love. His white moonlight. She was the true owner of this bar and someone I could never hope to compare to. As the door sealed shut again, the voices inside were cut off. I could no longer hear their mocking words. My mind spun, and my vision blurred. I vaguely heard someone call out, "President Sarah," but I couldn't focus. Staggering to the roadside, I pulled out my phone with trembling hands. My vision grew hazier, and I realized my low blood sugar was acting up. I popped a piece of candy into my mouth to steady myself. Then, I sent a text to Ethan. "Let's get a divorce." The birthday gift I gave him was a divorce agreement. I didn't ask for anything, only the house we'd lived in for the past 4 years. That moment, I finally understood one thing with painful clarity. I could never compete with a dead person. Not in the past and not in the future. Suddenly, a blinding light flashed. I looked up to see a truck barreling toward me. Behind me, a familiar yet distant voice shouted my name. "Sarah." When I opened my eyes again, I was back 5 years earlier. None of it had happened yet. Ethan's white moonlight was still alive, and he and I had never been married. Joy surged through me as I realized where I was. This was right after my graduation. Ethan's family business was struggling, and Hannah had just gone abroad. In my previous life, I gave up a promising career to join his company and help him rebuild everything, piece by piece. Ethan had always suffered from a severe stomach condition caused by years of overwork and irregular eating habits. I used to cook nutritious meals for him every day, trying different recipes to make sure he ate properly. At social events, where Ethan needed to drink to close deals with those bloated, self-important executives, I worried that the alcohol would worsen his condition. So, I often drank in his place, getting those executives drunk instead. Back then, maybe Ethan was truly moved by my efforts. On one occasion, after I had vomited uncontrollably from drinking too much, he didn't show any disgust. Instead, he made me sobering tea, silently watching over me for a long time before asking, Sarah, is it worth it? Even in my drunken haze, I couldn't forget the way his eyes curved into a smile when he asked that. It's worth it. I replied without hesitation. I like you, Ethan. I like you more than anything. But those fleeting moments of tenderness couldn't withstand the passage of time, or his endless longing for his white moonlight. Hannah. Eventually, I realized that he wasn't worth it. This time, I wouldn't quit my job for him. My phone rang, and it was Ethan. His voice sounded tired. Did your resignation request go through? He asked. I glanced at the resignation letter in my hand. If I hadn't been given this second chance, I would have taken this letter to the CEO's office, submitted it despite their attempts to make me stay, and left my promising position at this Fortune 500 company to join Ethan in a struggling little startup. I would have spent years helping him rebuild, only to witness Hannah's tragic death abroad during a robbery, leaving Ethan devastated and mute. In the end, I had almost coerced him into marrying me. But now, I laughed softly and replied, Ethan, I just texted your precious Hannah about your current situation. She said she'll come back to be with you. Let her take care of you from now on. There was a long silence on the other end, and I could imagine him frowning. His voice turned stern. What do you mean by this? Sarah. I responded clearly. I mean, if anyone wants to quit, it won't be me. If you love resigning so much, go ahead. I'm keeping my job at this Fortune 500 company. Before he could say another word, I hung up. The suffocating weight in my chest lifted slightly. Suddenly, a familiar, deep voice spoke behind me, laughing. You like this job so much? I turned and found myself looking into the eyes of Alexander Lane. His expression held a subtle smile, and the corners of his eyes crinkled with amusement. Seeing him brought back memories. In my past life, many people had looked down on me and Ethan, and many had taken pleasure in my struggles. But when I drank so much at an event that I ended up with a bleeding stomach and still failed to secure the deal, it was Alexander who spoke up for me. It wasn't until much later that I learned the truth. The executive I was negotiating with had originally planned to work with Alexander, but it was Alexander who had suggested giving me the contract instead. I had never gotten the chance to thank him in that life, not even before I died. Now, my eyes grew misty. Bowing deeply at a 90-degree angle, I said, Thank you, Mr. Lane. He raised an eyebrow and replied, I don't know why you're thanking me, but there's no need. Save the big gestures for my funeral. I stared at him in silence for a moment before muttering, No wonder you stayed single until I died. You deserve it. From the moment I met Ethan in college, I had always liked him, but even then, everyone knew about his feelings for Hannah. Their relationship was the talk of the school, and people even wrote notes on the dormitory walls, gossiping about their romance. Yet, in the end, they never got together. I thought that might be my chance. After graduation, I lingered around Ethan, hoping to stay close to him. His friends used to tease me every time they saw me, saying, Oh look, Ethan's little shadow is here again. But she's nowhere near as pretty as Hannah. Why don't you bring Hannah around instead? They never treated me like a person, just a joke to laugh at during gatherings. When I got angry, Ethan would frown and say, Don't make a scene. They didn't mean it. Some people seem perfect in everything they do, except they lose all sense of reason when it comes to love. I had lowered my standards and self-respect for him time and time again. But now, I wouldn't anymore. I would stay at Lane Enterprises and continue working. I thought someone as proud as Ethan would never come looking for me again. But that same evening, after work, a familiar car came screeching to a stop in front of me, nearly brushing against my leg. The window rolled down, revealing Ethan's cold, sharp face. His brows were furrowed, and his tone was laced with impatience as he said, Sarah, what's your problem? You just dropped the resignation thing like it's nothing? All that talk about liking me, wanting to help me with the company, was it all a joke? I smiled brightly. Yeah, so what? What are you gonna do? Bite me? With a job this good, I'd have to be crazy to leave and start a business with you. Ethan froze, completely thrown off by my sudden change in demeanor. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. After a few seconds, he let out a bitter laugh. Sarah, playing hard to get doesn't suit you. Just then, a hand rested lightly on my waist, and a cool, composed voice sounded above me. When we get married and you come to our wedding, make sure to bring that hard-to-get attitude along. It was Alexander Lane. Ethan didn't recognize him and immediately shot him a hostile look. Sarah, who is he? I turned to Ethan with a calm expression and asked, and who are you to me? What right do you have to question me? I smiled coldly before adding, Hannah is coming back soon. Isn't she? Since you're so obsessed with her, I think it's best we cut all ties before she returns. I have no interest in staying friends with someone I used to care about. Perhaps I had said something similar to him in the past because Ethan's eyes filled with disbelief. With a mocking tone, he said, Sarah, the last time you said you were done with me, you came crawling back within 3 days. You're pulling the same stunt again, aren't you? I bet you'll come running back to apologize within 7 days. I nodded lightly. Sure. Wait for it. I returned to my peaceful life. And, as I had hoped, Ethan didn't bother me again. I heard through the grapevine that Hannah had returned to the country, and it was Ethan himself who had gone to pick her up. Good. The tragedy from the last life wouldn't happen this time. Hannah wouldn't die, and I wouldn't marry Ethan. 2 days later, Alexander unexpectedly approached me. There's a banquet on Wednesday. Would you mind accompanying me? 10 times your daily salary, paid up front. My eyes lit up, and I nodded eagerly. Only someone as humble as me could take on such an important task. It's a piece of cake. Really? His eyes crinkled slightly with amusement. At the banquet, I quickly realized something was off. Almost every few steps, I bumped into one of Ethan's acquaintances. Fortunately, Ethan hadn't made a comeback yet and wasn't hanging around with them. After a trip to the restroom, however, I ran into him head-on. Ethan's expression was icy, but there was a hint of smugness in his raised brows. Sarah, it's only been 3 days, and you're already dying to come back and apologize. I gasped dramatically, looking him up and down. Where did this waiter come from? Don't you know how to behave properly? His face turned as dark as a storm cloud. His eyes swept over my expensive evening gown, and he frowned. So, you refused to quit your job because of money? I gave him a look of utter disdain. You tell me, who do you think is more attractive? Money or you? Don't embarrass yourself. Perhaps Ethan couldn't handle the fact that someone who had once been devoted to him was now treating him so indifferently. He sneered, his voice sharp. Sarah, how long do you plan to keep this act up? Sure, Hannah is back. But if you want to return to me, I'm willing to forgive you. I burst out laughing. Ethan, your entire net worth couldn't cover a month of my salary. What makes you think you're in any position to welcome me back? Your shamelessness. His face stiffened, the confidence he had clung to so tightly beginning to crack. But without the foolish infatuation I once had, his words no longer affected me. I calmly turned and walked away, leaving him to stew in his frustration. My wit had finally taken the high ground. Ethan's gaze darkened, and he strode forward, gripping my wrist tightly. His eyes bore into mine with an intensity that was both sharp and oppressive. Sarah, don't push me. Ethan, I said with a radiant smile, my tone light yet pointed. Do you know even dogs are eating dog food now? He blinked, caught off guard, clearly not understanding where this conversation was going. What are you talking about? I mean, if you have dog food, you should eat it properly. Don't go around eating someone else's trash. It's unhygienic and makes your breath stink. It's also unfair to Hannah. I smiled brightly, a wide, self-assured grin that was a stark contrast to the cautious and self-effacing expression I once wore in front of him. And honestly, if I were going to like someone, it'd be someone handsome. Take a good look at yourself. What about you could ever compare to my boss? I planted a hand on my hip, delivering my words in one smooth breath. A faint ache throbbed in my wrist from Ethan's grip, but it dulled as I noticed the flicker of something breaking in his eyes. A belief, a certainty, perhaps. Then, a familiar, low voice came from behind me, calm yet tinged with amusement. Sarah, at least you've got some taste. A hand intervened, deftly pulling my wrist free from Ethan's grip. Alexander's fingers brushed lightly over the faint red mark on my wrist. Does it hurt? He asked, his eyes meeting mine with a steadiness that made me let down my guard. Almost involuntarily, I nodded. His lips curved faintly. but a cold glint flickered in his gaze. If it hurts, hit him back. Just one punch. I'll raise your salary by $10,000. I rolled up my sleeve, flexing my bicep like a gorilla gearing up for a fight. Your loyal employee obeys. Sir. Ethan's face turned even darker, while Alexander seemed completely unbothered. His demeanor relaxed. Just as I was about to charge forward without hesitation, Alexander caught my wrist with one hand, his tone light. I wouldn't really let you hit him. At some point, the commotion had drawn attention. A group of people had gathered, watching us from a short distance. Among them, I noticed a few of Ethan's friends from last time. Their expressions toward me were as unpleasant as ever. One of them stepped forward, addressing Alexander. Mr. Lane, peace is most important. There's no need to harm relationships over a woman. I stayed silent, and so did Alexander. For a long moment, all eyes were on him. Finally, I glanced up and heard his calm voice. If he uses his gender to suppress you, I'll use my resources to suppress him. In that instant, I silently cursed my past self. In my previous life, it was as if my brain had been kicked by a donkey to quit my job. One of Ethan's friends interjected uneasily. Mr. Lane, isn't this a bit much? His gaze made my skin crawl, and suddenly, I remembered his behavior from the previous life. When I was with Ethan back then, this man often made lewd jokes at my expense. If I got upset, he'd laugh and raise an eyebrow. Come on, it's just a joke. Why are you so uptight? Ethan had typed out a message for me once. Don't sit here if you don't want to. Leave if you can't handle it. But this time, I raised my voice deliberately, ensuring his girlfriend could hear every word. Oh, by the way, there's a hairy mole on his left chest. I saw a ton of those full frontal videos of him circulating online recently. The room fell silent as every gaze turned toward me. The man's girlfriend, her face pale with fury, slapped him hard across the face. You scumbag, she yelled. I smirked and turned to the rest of the group, my gaze sweeping over them. Oh, and about the rest of you. And you, sleeping with your friend's woman behind his back? Or partnering with your friend's competitor to cost him billions? They were dumbstruck. How does she know all this? Afraid I'd say more. One of them stepped forward. Mr. Lane, please do us a favor. Could you stop her from speaking any further? Alexander smirked, exuding confidence. In North Capital, the Lane family stands unmatched. What's the value of your favor? Shall I swipe my card and buy it for you? The room fell silent. Ethan's friends, the ones who had been so arrogant in my previous life, mentally cursed him for provoking someone they couldn't handle. Alexander didn't just back me up against Ethan. He also helped me regain my footing in front of Ethan's future allies. With Alexander around, Ethan's path to rising again seemed far less certain than in my previous life. Satisfied, I turned to Alexander and gave him a playful salute. Boss, your immense kindness will forever be etched in my heart. You're like a savior to me. Alexander cleared his throat, a faint blush creeping across his face. If you're so grateful, offering yourself isn't off the table. Just as he said this, I added with a grin, I'll repay you by being your loyal servant in my next life. His expression darkened. Why not this life? I shrugged nonchalantly. Because I'm an ungrateful and undeserving person. What's wrong, boss? Are you upset? Should I drop to my knees and kowtow 3 times to show my sincerity? That won't be necessary, he replied, though his tone was tinged with exasperation. Ethan, nursing his bruised pride, kept his distance after that. He had his self-respect. After all, meanwhile, I happily threw myself into my work at the company. True to his word, Alexander raised my salary by $10,000, even though I never got the chance to hit Ethan. He joked that it was payment for entertaining him with all the gossip. As I predicted, without my help, and with Alexander intervening, Ethan faced resistance from many in North Capital. Few dared to collaborate with him, and his fledgling company suffered heavy blows. Just as it was teetering on the edge of collapse, I heard that Hannah had left him again. Ethan spiraled into a period of despair, but he didn't contact me. Instead, I received a call from his father. Sarah, why haven't you visited us lately? Your aunt and I talk about you every day. She's been so worried about you that she can't sleep. She's fallen ill these past few days and has been bedridden, constantly calling your name in her sleep." My heart softened at his words. In my previous life, one of the reasons I stayed by Ethan's side was because of his parents. They had always treated me well. Whenever Ethan ignored me, they would take turns scolding him. But after he became mute, his parents couldn't bear to criticize him anymore. Gripping my phone tightly, I felt a warmth rise in my chest, and my eyes misted over. "Uncle," I said softly, "I'll come visit you both once I'm done with work. Tell Auntie to take care of herself." "Good, good," he replied, his voice filled with joy. "She'll be so happy to see you." Lowering my voice, I asked cautiously, "Uncle, Ethan's not at home, is he?" There was a brief pause before he reassured me. "He's not. That boy wouldn't dare show his face around here. Sarah, don't worry. Your aunt and I will always have your back." Hearing his response, I finally felt a wave of relief wash over me. I didn't want to see Ethan or have any contact with him, but his parents had been kind to me in the past. And now that his mother was sick, not visiting would feel ungrateful. During this time, I'd already started thinking about branching out on my own. Following Ethan in the past had exposed me to many opportunities and taught me a lot. I was confident in my skills, and I had already discussed my plans with Alexander in advance. Alexander had said, "Sarah, I've always known your potential goes far beyond this company." After finishing my work for the week, I decided to visit Ethan's parents on Saturday. It had been so long that I almost forgot where they used to live before Ethan's success. All I remembered was how later, Ethan had moved them into the biggest and best villa. I arrived with several gifts in hand. Ethan's father greeted me with a warm smile. Just like in the past, nothing had changed. His parents were still as welcoming as ever. After some chatting, I helped his mother back to her room to rest. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she said, "Sarah, you're so kind and virtuous. If only Ethan could marry someone like you." I didn't respond. Kind and virtuous was hardly a compliment in my book. After tidying up, I got ready to say my goodbyes and head home, but his mother grabbed my hand and said, "Sarah, could you do me a favor and fetch a necklace from the room next to Ethan's? It's in the cabinet." I nodded, not noticing the fleeting guilt in her eyes. I walked into the room she mentioned and spotted the cabinet right away. I quickly found the necklace and was just about to leave when I heard a sound behind me. Turning around, I realized the door was shut tight. A sense of unease crept over me as I called out, "Uncle, Auntie, could you please open the door?" From outside, his mother's voice replied, "Sarah, there's a misunderstanding between you and Ethan that needs to be resolved. Don't blame me, sweetheart. I just want you two to have a proper talk." It felt as though my heart had plummeted from a great height. The faint hope I had held on to shattered completely. "Sarah, don't bother trying to get out," she added. "This room was remodeled by your uncle. It's not easy for just anyone to open it." That moment, I felt like I'd been plunged into an icy abyss. My body felt as though it was sinking deeper and deeper. I pulled out my phone, but as expected, there was no signal. They had planned everything, from pretending his mother was sick to remodeling the room. They even knew I would help them look for something. The effort they'd gone to, just to trap me, was astonishing. When I didn't respond, Ethan's father spoke up. "Sarah, don't be upset. Your aunt and I don't mean to harm you. Ethan will be back soon. When he's here, just have a good talk with him." "Okay." There was no room for refusal. When Ethan finally returned, I was sitting calmly in a chair, staring blankly at the door. I heard the sound of it unlocking, and then Ethan's face appeared. He rushed toward me and pulled me into a tight hug, his breathing heavy and erratic. Sarah, you still care about me, don't you? Mom and Dad said they tricked you into thinking I was in a car accident, and you came running without a second thought. If I ever ended up in such a situation, I know you'd be the one by my side." I sat motionless, letting him hold me. After a long pause, when he still wouldn't let go, I finally curled my lips into a mocking smile. "Ethan, you're pathetic." He froze. "A decent horse never doubles back on its tracks, and I certainly won't return to a rotting, withered pasture. Your parents imprisoning me is illegal." His arms loosened, and he stared at me in stunned silence. Do you know? I said firmly before he could respond. You knew about your parents tricking me into coming here with a fake story about your illness. But you pretended not to know. As if that could absolve you of any involvement. I shouldn't have had any illusions about your parents. You're all the same. Rotten to the core. Ethan's aura turned icy. He grabbed my chin, forcing me to tilt my head up and meet his gaze. Sarah, stop testing my limits over and over again. Didn't you used to like me the most? That was before. I replied coolly. Before I realized you didn't care about my feelings. But now, I get it. I don't love some imagined version of Hannah. I love you. The one who's always been by my side. Can we start over? I know Alexander was just pretending to be your boyfriend. You're not dating him. If this had been my past life, before I'd signed the divorce papers, I would have been so overwhelmed by his words that I'd stammer out a tearful response. But some words, when said too late, become nothing more than empty noise. I echoed the words he once used against me. Ethan, don't bother. If someone as perfect as Hannah couldn't bring out the best in you, how could anyone else? You're useless. His voice trembled, barely audible. But I only like you. I scoffed. You don't understand me. All you see is someone who's not ambitious enough, not striving for greatness. You've never truly accepted me. You even compare me to self-made CEOs, belittling me. It's not about liking me. It's about the pedestal you've put Hannah on. She's your white moonlight. Unattainable and untouchable, which is why you're obsessed with her. People always crave what they can't have. I leaned back in my chair, watching his expression crumble as I continued. Now that Hannah's back, just like I used to, she'll stick by your side and help you rebuild your business empire. You'll have your happy moments. Like any normal couple, Hannah will comfort and support you. But she's different from me. I smirked and added, Hannah believes in motivational encouragement. Remember that time with Mr. Zhang? His family went bankrupt, and he started his own business. Every day, he negotiated with other CEOs, drinking until late at night. Once, he almost drank himself to death. Or Mr. Wang, whose company went bankrupt twice. He nearly took his own life but managed to pull through. She'll tell you to look at those examples, to learn from them, and remind you that with your finance background, starting a business shouldn't be difficult for you. I paused for a moment before delivering the final blow. But unlike Hannah, I was soft and accommodating in the past. That's not who I am. I've always been impatient. It was my blind infatuation with you that changed me. Now, I'm clear-headed. I smiled, my tone light but piercing. And honestly, is she wrong? Ethan, no one wants you. Meanwhile, I've got plenty of suitors. Okay. His eyes turned red. His words stuck in his throat. He knew as well as I did that without my help, he wouldn't have secured the critical deal that Alexander had intentionally allowed him to win. That deal was the cornerstone of his success in my previous life. Now, it was gone, and nothing he did could bring it back. His frustration boiled over as he slammed the door behind him, leaving me with a bitter, parting remark. Sarah, I hope you wake up one day. I stayed seated, unfazed. My social life wasn't exactly vibrant, and the person I'd been spending the most time with lately was Alexander. But he was the company's CEO, and tomorrow was Sunday. Chances were, no one would notice if I went off the grid for a while. I curled up in the chair, quietly staring at the small window on the wall, faintly glimpsing the moonlight outside. A soft noise broke through my thoughts. Startled, I froze for a moment until a familiar voice spoke from above. Sarah, didn't even react to a sound? Why are you so out of it? I looked up and saw someone who shouldn't have been there. Alexander Lane. He had managed to open the tiny window and was leaning inside, his expression hovering between amusement and something else that felt a bit off. His slightly exaggerated grin was almost funny, but I sharply noticed that he seemed upset. Mr. Lane, why are you here? I asked. He raised a brow. If I waited for you to come out on your own, who knows how much work would get delayed? His tone was dry, almost sarcastic, typical capitalist. Seconds passed as we just looked at each other in silence. Finally, I asked, did you call the police? He tilted his head. Are you really willing to call the police? Of course. They're holding me against my will, restricting my personal freedom. Why wouldn't I call the police? Alexander muttered under his breath. I thought you still had feelings for Ethan and wouldn't report him. What feelings? I couldn't imagine what kind of mental gymnastics Alexander had to perform to keep himself so steady in that tiny window. I urged him, hurry up and call the police. He gave me a teasing glance. Should I really go? Yes, go, I said firmly. But minutes passed, and he didn't move. Confused, I stared at him, and for once, he looked unusually serious, even concerned. I was worried you might get scared if I left, he said softly. Scared of what? He averted his gaze. Aren't you afraid of the dark? How do you know I'm afraid of the dark? In my past life, after spending so much time around Ethan, he would always dismiss my fears with comments like, what's there to be scared of in the dark? Can't you stop being so dramatic? I had forced myself to suppress those fears, and eventually, they seemed to fade. Now, I stared directly at Alexander, waiting for an answer, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Outside, Ethan must have heard a sound. As he unlocked the door and stepped inside, Alexander had already slipped away from the window, leaving it closed and undisturbed. Moonlight streamed through, casting a calm glow over the room. Ethan's shoulders visibly relaxed as he asked, Are you hungry? I didn't respond. I was waiting for Alexander, who had promised to get me out of there. Moments later, the sound of police sirens shattered the silence. The entire Gu family froze in shock. The signal in the house had been blocked, so I couldn't make any calls or communicate with the outside world. Ethan seemed to realize something and suddenly turned to look at me. His gaze darkened when he saw Alexander striding in and pulling me into his arms. I stared directly at Ethan, then turned to Alexander and asked softly, Did you know me before? He stiffened slightly, his usually composed face growing colder. I continued, You knew I was afraid of the dark. In my past life, you gave up that deal to me, and when you couldn't contact me, you found your way to Ethan's place. It's hard not to suspect you knew something. For a moment, he didn't say anything, his silence as heavy as his demeanor. Finally, he smirked faintly and said, I was planning to wait until you were gone. Put a QR code on your tombstone so you could scan it and remember what you'd forgotten. But it looks like you figured it out a little early. How frustrating. But you don't look frustrated at all. For now, Ethan didn't want to talk about the past. He ran away, and the police couldn't find where he'd gone. Alexander was worried about me, so he personally drove me home every night. He wouldn't leave until he saw my apartment lights come on. For a few days, everything seemed peaceful, but I couldn't stop frowning, wondering why Ethan had fled. Running away would only worsen his punishment. His company, though small, had required a significant investment. Almost all of his family's remaining money had been poured into his projects. Recently, there had been a bidding event at work where I noticed Lane Enterprises was also preparing to compete. In my past life, Lane Enterprises hadn't won the bid, allowing Ethan and me to pick up the pieces. Now, however, Ethan's company was leaderless and in chaos. Seeing the company I had worked so hard to build in the past reduced to this state left me feeling disoriented and uneasy. Alexander had known about it before I did. He called me into his office to break the news. Lifting his gaze lazily, he asked, Sarah, what did you ever see in a man like that? I shrugged. I don't know. You tell me. He clenched his jaw, letting out a silent, frustrated laugh. I don't want my future kids inheriting a criminal record. I know the world's top eye specialists. Want me to book you a free appointment? You clearly need your eyes checked. You can't even recognize a decent man standing right in front of you. Liking Ethan was like carrying a criminal record. It left you cautious and full of regrets. The following days were a whirlwind of work, and Ethan didn't appear again. Soon, I wouldn't have to work for anyone else or live my life for someone else. I had the skills. Why not start my own venture? Alexander fully supported my decision. He told me, if a company fears its employees becoming too capable and leaving to start their own business, then that company won't survive in the long run. One evening, under the dim glow of the streetlights, Alexander drove me to my apartment complex as usual. I asked him to drop me off at the gate, not wanting to cause any misunderstandings. The security guards had started to assume he was my boyfriend, and I didn't want the rumors to spread. He hesitated, then said, "You're worried I'll scare off potential boyfriends, aren't you?" I rolled my eyes and walked into the complex on my own. As I approached my building, I remembered the light at the entrance was broken. The thought made me uneasy. When I reached the stairwell, a hand suddenly reached out from the shadows and pulled me into the landing between floors. Another hand clamped tightly over my mouth, silencing me completely. The moment our breaths mingled, I could hear the person's rapid heartbeat. The sensation was so familiar that it only took seconds for me to realize it was Ethan. But wasn't he still wanted by the police? Ethan slowly released his hand from my mouth, his breathing heavy, his heartbeat frantic. His dark, haunted eyes locked onto mine. I forced myself to stay calm. "Ethan, don't make things worse for yourself." His voice trembled, raw and unsteady, like that of a lost child. "I think I've already made a mistake. What should I do now?" I froze, understanding his unspoken words. He wasn't talking about his crimes. He was talking about letting Hannah go. He held my hand slowly, his palm damp with sweat and trembling. In the dim light, I could see that his eyes were slightly red. His voice, soft and unsteady, broke through the silence. "Sarah, why did you push me away to someone else? Don't you like me anymore?" My mind roared, a cacophony of emotions threatening to drown me. I clenched my palms tightly to stay calm. He continued, his voice fragile yet persistent. "These days, I keep dreaming about you, over and over again." This didn't make sense. At this point in his life, Ethan shouldn't have any feelings for me. Yet, he kept talking. "In my dreams, I know it's you and me, but the scenes I see, they've never happened before." I glanced toward the stairwell, trying to think of a way to escape. I forced myself to respond indifferently. "For example?" He swallowed hard and said, "In one dream, I saw that Hannah didn't return to the country. She died abroad. I pretended to be mute, and yet you insisted on marrying me. You stayed by my side, helped me rebuild, and worked tirelessly to help me rise again. I even dreamed of you drinking with executives to secure contracts, until it caused you to bleed internally." My gaze shot up to meet his, my disbelief barely masked. These were all real events from my past life. How could he have dreamed about them? But I forced my face to remain calm. "If these are the things you came to tell me, you're wasting your time. I'm not the person you're looking for." He grabbed my arm again, his eyes trembling with emotion, his entire being on the verge of collapse. "Sarah, you've been reborn too, haven't you?" I stared at him, my tone cold. "Ethan, you're delusional." The moment those words left my mouth, he seemed to snap completely. His voice cracked with desperation. "I went mad the moment I realized you liked Alexander, and I pushed you toward Hannah. I've been insane ever since." Before I could react, he lowered his head, aiming for my lips. I turned away at the last second, his kiss landing awkwardly on my cheek. And then, a loud thud. I didn't even see the punch coming, but Ethan was already sprawled on the ground, his eyes still fixed on me. Despite the pain, he begged hoarsely, "Sarah, don't leave me. I'm begging you, please." I averted my eyes, focusing instead on Alexander, who stepped forward, wrapping an arm around my waist. His body was stiff, awkward in its closeness. Lowering my voice, I asked, "Why are you here?" "You didn't reply to my messages," he said plainly. "I was worried something had happened, so I came to check on you." Relief washed over me as I exhaled quietly. Ethan was arrested for unlawful detention. Although his parents were partly involved, he was the primary culprit. His attempt to evade the law only added to his charges. When he requested to see me, I went. He had shaved his head and looked nothing like the Ethan I once knew. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, filled with remorse. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "the person I've wronged the most in this life is you. I'm so sorry for how I treated you in the past life. If I had remembered sooner, if I had treated you better, would things have turned out differently?" I cut him off, meeting his gaze with unwavering coldness. "No. From the moment I decided to divorce you, I stopped liking you." The light in his eyes faded completely, and his already frail frame seemed to wither further. He looked like a skeleton, devoid of hope or vitality. "Ethan," I said, My tone steady. The person you should regret failing the most isn't me. It's the company you built with your own hands. Because that was once our shared dream. 2. I stopped paying attention to Ethan. He had truly disappeared from my life. Alexander often invited me to networking dinners. First, I wanted to decline, but he raised an eyebrow and said, "Don't you want to start your own business? How are you going to succeed if you don't understand the market?" I grumbled inwardly but didn't dare argue. As the dinner was wrapping up, I stepped out to pay the bill. When I returned, I overheard the group talking about me. "Mr. Lane, you seem to really like this young lady. Why not make her your secretary?" It wasn't uncommon for people like them to move someone they liked into their office, using the position of a personal assistant to keep them close. Alexander raised an eyebrow, his tone indulgent but firm. "She has her own skills. Why would I trap her by my side? The best I can do is provide her a platform to showcase her talents." That's enough. The others exchanged glances and chuckled. Most didn't take his words seriously, brushing it off as nothing more than indulgence for a woman. But years later, I founded one of the country's leading women's products companies. When they saw how much money I was making, they came to me, begging for advice on how to replicate my success. I smiled at them. If you want to make money from women, start by learning to respect them. Of course, that's a story for another time. At the dinner's end, Alexander drove me home as usual. When we arrived, I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I turned and stared at him, my gaze steady and probing. "Alexander, you once said we'd met before. Could you explain?" His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel, and he looked away, his usual composure faltering. "You don't want to know." I pressed further. "Try me." After a long pause, he finally spoke. His voice was quieter than usual. "It was during a tough time in my life. My business had failed, and I didn't even have $5 in my pocket. I sat outside a convenience store, staring at the sky, wondering if I'd ever stand back up again. You came out of the store and mistook me for a homeless man. You bought me something to eat and drink. For me, it was a casual act of kindness, something so insignificant I didn't even remember it. But for him, it was unforgettable." He added, "Later, when I saw you working with Ethan, I couldn't help but offer you that deal." I was quiet for a moment, then teased, "Why didn't you mention this earlier? Didn't want to remind yourself of those struggles?" He shook his head, his gaze avoiding mine. "I don't see that time as a stain on my life. I just wanted you to always see me as strong and capable." I reached out, cupping his face with both hands, forcing him to look at me. "No one is always strong, just as no one is always weak. It's because of who you were then that you are who you are now. And your success now, it's amazing." "Really?" I nodded firmly. "Really? I think you're both cool and handsome." He stared at me for a long moment before the corner of his mouth curled into a smile. A small, mischievous hook. His voice was low and magnetic. "How about you consider making this official? I'm a great investment. Low risk, guaranteed returns." I couldn't help but laugh. "Fine. I'll reluctantly accept your offer." Sometimes, someone appears in your life when you're covered in scars and full of doubt, giving you the chance to love and be loved again. Later, Alexander joked that his throat was sore for days from trying to convince me that night. "Good thing you like me." And so, the first story came to an end, making way for a new beginning. The second story started on the day of my engagement party with Aaron. After 10 years of dating, we were finally tying the knot. But on the day of the party, his secretary showed up late, wearing a white dress. Aaron's voice was cold as he told her to leave, his words sharp and unforgiving. Everyone praised him for his loyalty to me, painting the secretary as a shameless social climber. But only I knew the truth. In the 4 years I was abroad, Aaron spent every anniversary of our relationship with her, his beloved secretary, Zoe. The story begins today. At my engagement party with Aaron, after 10 years together, we were finally celebrating our milestone. The banquet was filled with well wishes and congratulations from the guests. Aaron held me by the waist as we made rounds toasting the guests. He was unusually drunk tonight, his chin resting against my shoulder as he murmured, "Aaron, you're finally back." His breath, tinged with alcohol, made my ears warm. Suddenly, The clinking of glasses in the hall came to an abrupt halt. The doors swung open, and a woman entered, wearing a dazzling white gown adorned with diamonds that sparkled under the lights. The red carpet from the ceremony hadn't yet been removed, and she walked in like a bride arriving late for her own wedding. The room fell silent, every gaze turning toward me. The engagement ceremony had already concluded, and the banquet was simply for entertaining guests. I was wearing a more practical and understated dress for toasting, which paled in comparison to Zoe's extravagant gown, one that looked ready for a wedding. Aaron's arm stiffened slightly around my waist. Then, in a low, grave voice, he said, "What are you doing?" Zoe froze at his tone, clearly startled, but her eyes still held a hint of defiance. "I just came from a bridal photography exhibition hosted by a friend. It was her graduation project, and I didn't have time to change." "Get out." Aaron cut her off, his voice cold and commanding, louder than I had ever heard it before. Aaron rarely lost his temper in public, but this sharp rebuke brought tears to Zoe's eyes. She gripped the edge of her skirt tightly, her face flushed with humiliation, and turned to leave under the watchful gaze of the crowd. The murmurs and suspicions among the guests quickly dissipated. Aaron lowered his head to kiss the corner of my lips, his tone soft and reassuring. "Aaron, don't feel bad. She's the one who crossed the line, and she deserved that." His arm tightened protectively around my waist, his voice as gentle as ever, but my fingertips grew colder and colder. I had seen those earrings Zoe was wearing before. When Aaron and I were selecting accessories for the wedding, I had chosen a pair of understated pearl earrings with small diamond accents. But Aaron said they were too plain and didn't match the grandeur of my 2 wedding dresses. So, I chose a different pair from the new collection and didn't think about the pearls again. But now, those same earrings hung from Zoe's ears, perfectly complementing her dress. Aaron had secretly bought them, not for me, but for her. Later, my best friend, Grace, called to vent her frustration. "Aaron, that little snake did it on purpose, didn't she? It was your engagement party. For crying out loud, she shows up late wearing that kind of dress? The nerve. And after everything you've done for her, helping her with school, getting her a good job, she turns around and tries to steal your fiancé. What a backstabber." When I didn't respond for a long time, Grace paused before sighing. "But hey, at least Aaron handled it well. Don't let this make you doubt him. He really loves you." Grace wasn't the only one who thought so. Even my parents believed Zoe's behavior was simply a lapse in judgment. To everyone else, Aaron was the perfect fiancé. Young, accomplished, from a prestigious family, and impossibly handsome. He was considerate, gentle, and had been by my side for a decade without a single scandal. When I decided to delay our marriage to study abroad, he supported me wholeheartedly. Before I left, he arranged a meeting between our families to set our engagement. When I returned, he said, "Whenever you're ready, we'll get engaged and married." Aaron kept every promise he made to me. I had no reason not to marry a man like him. If only I hadn't seen those earrings. I hung up the phone and stared blankly at the device on the table. Aaron had always been open and honest. He never hid anything. Even when he went to take a shower, his phone would sit right in front of me. That's why, when a few messages popped up on the screen, I couldn't help but glance at them. "I really didn't mean to steal the spotlight from you, Aaron. I've already apologized to him. Can you stop being angry with me? I know I was wrong. I've been punished enough." My leg's broken. Rain was pouring heavily outside, and the messages left a sour taste in my mouth. Suddenly, I felt an arm wrap around my waist from behind. Aaron smelled faintly of his usual shower gel. Every time he finished bathing, he liked to hold me like this, pulling me onto his lap while we curled up on the couch to watch a movie or play games. I pressed my lips together. "Your phone keeps buzzing. Seems like something urgent." "Nothing's urgent today." He kissed my temple. "It's our 10th anniversary, Aaron." Aaron had a habit of completely shutting out work on our anniversaries, muting group chats, turning on airplane mode, and ignoring any messages or calls. But this time, he hadn't. When I saw him light up his phone, I felt his body stiffen for a split second. "Sorry, Aaron," he said, his voice unsteady. "There's an urgent PR issue I need to handle." It was the first time Aaron had ever lied to me so poorly. I didn't call him out on it. Instead, I watched as he hastily threw on a coat and left the house in a rush. His clothes still unkempt. The sight was almost laughable. Aaron rarely acted this flustered, and the fact that it was for Zoe made it all the more absurd. 4 years ago, when I was preparing to leave the country, I had asked Aaron to look after Zoe. She had just finished high school, supported by the financial aid I'd provided throughout her education. She had gotten into a good university and seemed so fragile when she found out I was leaving. The scrawny girl hugged me tightly, her eyes swollen like walnuts. "Sis, will you still remember me when you come back?" I tousled her hair, pulling her closer. "Don't say such silly things. Of course, I'll remember you. Where else would I go?" I had winked at Aaron and added, "Besides, you've got your brother-in-law to back you up." Aaron had smiled helplessly, his gaze warm as always. From the time Zoe started high school until she graduated from college and began working at Aaron's company, I had supported her every step of the way. Even when she became Aaron's secretary, it was with my approval. School and the real world are so different. There's so much I don't understand yet. She used to say, "Thank goodness I have your husband to guide me." She would always share her daily life with me, chatting endlessly. On our anniversaries, she'd never fail to send me her blessings. "Happy anniversary, Aaron. Your husband is amazing." But this year, there was nothing. Ever since I came back, Zoe had barely contacted me. A notification appeared on my phone. Zoe had updated her social media with a new post. "Things haven't been going well for me lately. But tonight, the moon is beautiful." The accompanying photo showed her arm in a cast, a hospital dressing visible. In the corner of the picture, barely noticeable, was a man's hand. I knew that hand all too well. It had tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear just half an hour ago. I clicked on Zoe's profile. She had changed her settings, allowing me to see more of her posts. As I scrolled, I found entries I hadn't seen before, and all of them, without exception, were about Aaron. The earliest one was from 4 years ago, not long after I had left the country. "He's like the moon in the night sky. I'm the child who's happy just to be bathed in moonlight." The picture showed a few medication boxes and the silhouette of Aaron standing in a hospital hallway. I remembered that time clearly. Zoe had fallen seriously ill, and with no family in the city to help her, I had been worried sick. Fearing for her health, I asked Aaron to check on her for me. He had driven through the night and video called me from her bedside. His brow furrowed with exhaustion. He was just 18 years old back then, practically still a child. Aaron used to tell me, "Aaron, you're only 24 yourself." He'd reach out through the screen during our video calls, as if to stroke my face, and assure me, "Don't worry, I'll take care of the people you care about." He never broke a promise. Under Aaron's care, Zoe smoothly made it through 4 years of college. She'd share her daily life with me, and I thought I knew everything about her. But today, I realized there were over 100 posts on her hidden social media that I had never seen. One post read, "I'm so happy today. He brought me a cake." When I closed my eyes to make a wish, I made him close his eyes too. His eyes are so beautiful. I wish this moment could last forever. Another post showed a video call notification from me. The caption was heartbreaking. I was so sad. The card had both of their names written together. I didn't like it. The card was from Aaron. His handwriting was unmistakable. The cake and the message were things I had picked out in advance. Aaron had simply followed through on my instructions. Yet, in the signature at the bottom, he had added a small flourish, a tiny heart drawn between our names. Zoe had scratched out my name. I remembered that day clearly. She had messaged me, "Aaron, this is the best birthday I've ever had. Thank you." I had replied, "We'll celebrate many more birthdays together." As I scrolled further, my fingers began to tremble. If the earlier posts were the delusions of someone hopelessly infatuated, the later ones showed a mutual understanding, a shared ambiguity that neither had spoken aloud. He said I looked really cute today. He told me to buy more clothes like this. Work is so exhausting. But at least he brought me an iced Americano. So bitter though. Who slipped me watermelon-flavored candies to cheer me up? Another late night at the office. No overtime pay. But who else has a boss who compensates with a limited edition necklace? In one post, Zoe shared a 9-photo grid of selfies wearing the necklace. Her captions playful and full of the giddiness of a young girl in love. The photos told a story of intimacy. Aaron driving her to and from work, bringing her umbrellas on rainy days, postponing meetings for her, praising her work, and taking her out for lavish dinners. The final posts were the most devastating. The day before I returned to the country, Zoe had posted a photo of Aaron's silhouette with the caption, "Is it ending now?" Then, a picture of the pearl earrings I hadn't bought but had admired. A gift from Aaron. Her caption read, "I'm willing to be a mouse, begging for scraps in the darkness, as long as I can see my moon." Finally, there was a post from our engagement day. "I'm not willing to accept this. And tonight, the moon is beautiful." My fingers froze, turning as cold as ice. Mechanically swiping through the screen, felt as though every image, every word, was a dagger plunging into my chest, tearing me apart. The betrayal, replayed over and over, left me bleeding out. Then a message from Aaron appeared. "Aaron, the situation is a bit tricky. I won't make it home tonight. Don't wait up. You've been tired lately. Make sure to get some rest. I love you. Good night." The phone screen dimmed gradually, its glow fading into darkness. A tidal wave of emotion crashed over me. When I stood, I realized a sound was filling the room. A faint, rhythmic tapping against my eardrums. It took me a moment to understand it was my teeth chattering. When I was younger, I was bold and brazen, but after turning 20, I had learned to temper my emotions, to maintain composure in any situation. Or so I thought. I was wrong. I didn't scream or cry. I didn't lash out in rage. But the entire room seemed to quake. My body trembled uncontrollably, every inch of me shaking. In the living room, Aaron had set up candles, 99 of them, all burning brightly. He had said that tonight, for our 10th anniversary, there should have been 100. But he left the last one for me to light. The candles sat within reach, but no one was waiting for me to light it. When I bent down in the kitchen to grab the scissors, tears fell and extinguished the first candle. Thinking back, this was the first time Aaron had ever made me cry. The very first time in our 10 years together. Cutting the wick of each candle should have been quick and simple, but it took me 3 whole hours to snuff them all out. When I finally finished, I collapsed onto the couch, staring out at the horizon as the sky began to lighten. I listed the house on a second-hand marketplace. To be honest, dealing with moving companies and negotiating with real estate agents was a first for me. I wasn't familiar with the process, and with my voice thick from crying, every conversation felt awkward and stilted, but I managed to get everything done. I suppose leaving someone is like that, too. When the movers arrived, they asked what should be done with Aaron's things. "Should we pack them up with yours?" I shook my head. "Take them downstairs and throw them away. Or keep them if you like." These were all things Aaron had carefully chosen for our wedding preparations. But they were useless now. The movers exchanged glances, their eyes lighting up momentarily before cautiously looking back at me. "It's fine," I said, voice calm but firm. "I can afford to replace every single item here. And Aaron? He's just another thing I've outgrown. I've always had plenty of properties in this city, but the only one I truly lived in was the house Aaron and I had planned to share." That morning, I booked 2 plane tickets and dragged Grace along on a trip. When she saw me, Grace teased, "Miss Lynn, what's the occasion? Shouldn't you be going on a sweet getaway with your fiancé instead of me?" 4 years ago, Grace and I had both chosen to study abroad. Though in different countries, it had been a long time since we'd had a chance to meet up alone. "There's no fiancé anymore." Grace raised an eyebrow playfully. "Well, technically, you could call him your husband now, couldn't you?" Aaron cheated. It took Grace a moment to process my words. "Impossible," she blurted out. "The odds of every man on earth dying are higher than Aaron cheating." I couldn't blame her. Our story was like something out of a fairy tale. In high school, Aaron and I were both popular figures, but our reputations couldn't have been more different. Aaron was the top student, calm and dependable, with the kind of looks that made him the perfect older brother figure, the golden boy of the school. His desk drawers were constantly stuffed with love letters, and he was a permanent feature on the school's confession wall. I, on the other hand, was the wild rich girl, the rebel, When the school mandated that we tie our hair back, I went and got mine permed into big waves. I was summoned to the principal's office so often it felt like home. No one thought Aaron and I were a good match. Not even me. That's why I never expected Aaron to pursue me so openly. He waited for me after class. Even requested a schedule change so we could be in the same homeroom. Teachers called him to the office multiple times to warn him. His persistence amused me. Blowing smoke in his direction, I asked, "Aaron, are you out of your mind? I'm not into guys like you." "What kind of guys do you like?" he asked. I smirked. "Guys who smoke, drink, and fight. You know, the complete opposite of you." Aaron didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, without a word, he reached into my pocket, pulled out a cigarette, and lit it using mine. He didn't know how to smoke, though, and ended up coughing violently. Someone snapped a picture, and the photo was soon plastered all over the school's forum. Everyone said he'd lost his mind. I thought so too, until the day I got into an argument that spiraled out of control. I was accused of bullying a delicate, teary-eyed girl who cried her heart out in the office. The school decided to make an example of me, calling a meeting in front of all the students and staff to reprimand me. When my name was mentioned, Aaron stood up from the crowd and walked to the podium. "Show us proof," he said clearly, his voice unwavering. The room fell silent. Aaron repeated, "If you can't provide evidence that Aaron bullied anyone, then what you're doing is defamation. And everyone who spreads this lie is complicit." I had always been too proud to care about others' opinions. But in that moment, as Aaron stepped forward, I realized how wonderful it felt to have someone believe in you so firmly. After that, I cut my hair, quit smoking, and stopped sleeping in class. But I still didn't say yes to him. From that day on, however, Aaron's name dominated the confession wall, and mine was right beside it. Our names were always paired together. Even now, Aaron and I were still ranked as the top campus couple of our old university on social media. Wearing sunglasses, I found the sunlight particularly blinding. My phone buzzed incessantly, a never-ending stream of vibrations. Over the past 2 days, Aaron had called me at least 100 times. I hadn't declined a single call, but I hadn't answered any either. Grace waved her phone at me. "Aaron's looking for you. Don't you want to talk to him? Maybe it's all a misunderstanding." I shook my head and closed my eyes. "Zoe's no angel," Grace added. "That little brat could have set this all up on purpose. You know she's manipulative." I exhaled slowly. "Zoe's a piece of work. That's for sure. I know all her tricks. But she couldn't have crossed the line without Aaron allowing it. No matter how clever she is, she wouldn't have gotten her hands on those earrings. Earrings only Aaron ever saw me admire. Without his permission, she wouldn't have dared wear a wedding dress and crash our engagement party unless his 4 years of favoritism emboldened her to do so. I had seen how Aaron loved me once, so I knew exactly why he acted so out of character that day. He felt sorry, but not for me anymore. Cutting off 10 years of connection was far harder than I imagined. Our lives were too entwined. Beyond our relationship, we had intertwined projects at work, things that couldn't be resolved overnight. When I returned to the city, Zoe found me before Aaron did. She ran up to me, grabbing my arm. "Where have you been? Aaron's been looking everywhere for you. He's losing his mind." Zoe was shorter than me. She tilted her head upward, her round eyes wide and brimming with innocence. The same helpless look she'd had 8 years ago. Back then, her hair was dry and brittle, her family poor and desperate. Her grandfather had refused to let her attend school, insisting she work to support her younger brother. Despite being a child herself, Zoe had been skilled at household chores. She knew I was sponsoring impoverished students but stayed distant, letting her brother take most of the benefits. One day, when her grandfather wasn't home, I found her crouched by the stove, tending a fire. "Do you want to go to school?" I asked. "Do you want to leave this village?" Her eyes widened, filled with fear and hope. Her fingers twisted the hem of her worn shirt as she stared at me. Unsure if she could trust me, she looked like a stray puppy, abandoned but desperate for help. I crouched down and hugged her. "If you want to go, I'll take you. I'll help you." She clutched my sleeve like I was her only lifeline and whispered, "Sister." From that day on, she called me sister for 8 years. And every time she did, No matter how angry I was, I would soften. But now, hearing her call me sister only made my stomach churn. He couldn't find me? Shouldn't you be happy about that? I pried her fingers off my arm. Isn't this exactly what you wanted? During the few days I spent traveling, trying to clear my head, Zoe had been busy updating her social media. If only this time could last a little longer. I wish the moon could always belong to me. Her captions revealed everything, leaving no room for pretense. Zoe froze for a moment, the innocent expression on her face gradually fading. Instead, there was a hint of relief, as if she had finally made up her mind. She took a step back. "Aaron," she said, her voice steady. "For all these years, I've been so grateful for everything you've done for me. I used to tell myself that when I grew up, I find a way to repay you. But what can I give someone who already has everything? Now that I'm grown, I realize that apart from your charity, I have nothing. I owe you so much." Zoe began, her voice trembling. "Everything you've given me, I'll repay little by little. And for what I can't repay right now, I'll work for the rest of my life to make it up to you. Whatever you want to take back, I'll return it to you. But Aaron, he's not an object. He belongs to the person he loves. And right now, he loves me." Her words struck me like a slap, each syllable dripping with misplaced conviction. "Aaron loves me," she repeated, her tone unwavering. "When he decided to love me, he didn't hesitate, not for a second. He was braver than I ever was when I accepted your help. I had never known a person could be so shameless." To Zoe, the only thing she owed me was material, financial aid, designer bags, clothes, and luxury items. She didn't understand, and perhaps never would, that the most valuable thing she ever received was my genuine, unconditional kindness. "Aaron loves you?" I laughed coldly. "To what extent?" "Exactly." Her face turned pale. Deep down, she knew the truth. That's why she came to me, hoping I would walk away willingly. She understood that as long as I didn't let go, Aaron never would. If he could, he wouldn't have rushed to propose as soon as I returned to the country. Speak of the devil. Aaron appeared just then. The moment he saw me, he broke into a sprint, almost getting hit by a car as he crossed the street without hesitation. He stopped in front of me, wrapping me in a tight embrace. "Where have you been? Why haven't you been answering my calls? The house, why is it empty? They told me you're selling it. Why, Aaron, what's going on?" His eyes were red as he looked down at me, noticing how lightly I was dressed. He unbuttoned his coat and carefully wrapped it around me, pulling me into his warmth. Zoe stood there the whole time, just a few feet away. It was as if Aaron didn't even see her. Her fingers dug into her palms, her face as pale as paper. "Aaron," she whispered, her voice trembling. But Aaron didn't respond. He didn't even glance in her direction. Instead, he rubbed my freezing hands between his voice full of concern. "It's too cold outside. Aaron, you'll catch a cold. Let's go home." "Okay, let's go home." Aaron had bought back the house. Everything I had thrown away before I left had been restored to its original place within days, as if I had never left. He wanted everything to go back to how it was before. But how could that be possible? A broken glass, no matter how carefully pieced back together, would still show its cracks. Once the ongoing projects were completed, I would announce the cancellation of the wedding to the media. I'd leave it to Aaron to explain things to his parents. If they had any questions, they could call me. "Don't hold me like this," I said, gently pushing against his chest. "It's not appropriate anymore, given our current relationship." Aaron's arms, solid and unyielding, tightened around me. His voice shook, something I had rarely heard before. "Aaron, why?" I was silent for a long time. I wanted to ask so many questions. Why were the earrings not suitable for me but perfect for Zoe? Why had his care for her, born from my request, turned into something deeper? Why did 6 years of growing together, from youth to maturity, mean less to him than the 4 years he had with someone else? Why did he blur the boundaries, allowing someone else to cross into a space that was supposed to belong to us? I looked at the face I had loved for 10 years, suppressing all the emotions threatening to erupt. In the end, I only asked him one question. The night of our 10th anniversary, Who did you go to see? Aaron froze. His mouth opened, but no words came out. I turned to leave, but he grabbed my wrist, holding me tightly. Aaron, he pleaded. That night, Zoe was hurt. I just went to see her, Aaron said, his voice trembling. You went to see her? I asked coldly. Then why did you tell me you were going to the office? If it was just to see her, why did you have to hide it from me? Aaron, I continued, my tone sharp. Don't forget, I'm the one who sponsored Zoe. If anyone has a right to care about her, it's me. I extended my hand, prying his fingers off mine one by one. Stop pretending to love me. Your love is too cheap. I'm not some charity case. Aaron, I'm worth more than that. Aaron's eyes turned red, the veins in them almost visible. In a near frenzy, he pushed me down onto the sofa, his strength unrelenting, like a beast gone mad. Cheap? Lynn Aaron, how can you say that so calmly? After all these years, what have I ever meant to you? Did you stay with me just to repay me for saving your life? Did you ever love me at all? His words dragged me back to that snowy day years ago. After high school, I never accepted Aaron's pursuit. I was reckless by nature, hating anything that tied me down, including love. Right after graduation, I decided to trek Mount Pan alone, signing a liability waiver with a travel agency before embarking on what I thought was just another adventure. But Aaron had followed me without my knowledge. You've lost your mind, haven't you? I had yelled at him. This is the kind of thing that could get you killed. Aaron only held my hand gently and said, if you're not afraid, then I'm not afraid either. I was the one who jinxed us. Halfway through the climb, the mountain was hit by a snowstorm. The metal chains along the trail were slick with ice, and I nearly slipped to my death. Aaron held on to me with all his strength, his entire body frozen as he braced himself against the snow. For nearly 2 hours, he didn't move, afraid that even the slightest shift would cause him to lose his grip on me. By the time rescuers arrived, his hands were completely numb. I later learned he had strained them so badly that he couldn't move his fingers properly for weeks. When we got home, I finally agreed to be his girlfriend. From that day forward, I gave up my adventurous lifestyle. Aaron once joked that I'd grown timid, but I never told him the truth. It wasn't fear of the unknown that changed me. I just couldn't bear the thought of losing him. But love itself is the ultimate adventure. 10 years ago, Aaron had dived into it headfirst without hesitation. 10 years later, I was the one left behind. The memories flooded over me, threatening to tear down the calm facade I'd worked so hard to maintain. I closed my eyes, digging my nails into my palms to steady myself. Whether we loved each other or not doesn't matter anymore, I said, forcing a lightness into my voice. Aaron, we're adults. Breaking up shouldn't feel like the end of the world, should it? The corner of my mouth lifted into a smile even I didn't understand. All I knew was that the man in front of me was no longer the boy who had once stood by me so steadfastly in college. Aaron refused to accept the breakup, but it didn't matter. Starting a relationship takes two people, but ending one only requires one. I moved into an apartment as far away as possible from what had once been our wedding home. My plan was to wait until our joint projects were completed before formally announcing the end of our relationship in the most dignified way possible. In my youth, Aaron had been unbeatable in my heart. Even now, I couldn't bring myself to expose the ugly truth to the world, to turn him into a public disgrace. But reality doesn't care about plans. During a final meeting with a client to close a deal, Zoe appeared. She arrived before Aaron, her entrance drawing the attention of everyone present. Her dress hugged her figure, showcasing the curves of her youthful body. She moved gracefully between the tables, her smile charming and coy, raising her glass as she flitted from one guest to the next. It was clear she was there to win them over, and she played her role perfectly. I frowned. Zoe suddenly showing up in front of our business partners was clearly a move to flaunt her presence and assert her status. But this wasn't a party. It was a negotiation table. Her behavior only made her look like a pawn for amusement. During the dinner, one of the business partners put his arm around Zoe's waist. She froze, not realizing what was happening until she leaned back slightly, causing wine to spill down her chest. The white silk of her dress turned translucent where it soaked through, clinging to her skin. The partner smirked and pulled her onto his lap. Mr. Ma, I began, rising to my feet, but before I could say more, the door to the private room swung open. Aaron stormed in, his face dark with fury. He didn't hesitate. 2 punches landed squarely on Mr. Ma's face. Aaron! Zoe cried, clutching her chest as tears streamed down her face. Aaron shrugged off his coat, wrapping it around her shoulders as she collapsed against his chest. She trembled uncontrollably as he picked her up. Her arms instinctively circled his neck, a move so practiced it felt second nature. As he carried her past me, Aaron paused. He looked at me, his expression icy and filled with disappointment. Aaron, he said, his voice low, even if you hate me, you shouldn't stoop to such tactics to humiliate her. You shouldn't hurt her. The fragile stitches holding my composure together tore apart, leaving my heart exposed to the cold wind. The boy who once stood up for me against an entire auditorium, declaring his unwavering belief in me, seemed long gone. Aaron left, carrying Zoe in his arms. The rest of the room's eyes shifted to me. To them, I was still Aaron's fiancée. I raised my glass, forcing a smile. Sorry for the scene, I said, and downed the liquor in one go. The burning sensation seared my throat and lungs, making my head spin. It wasn't until then that I remembered I hadn't had a drink in years. But maybe this was for the best. It was time to become the Lynn Aaron I was before Aaron ever came into my life. The next day, a 10-year-old post about Aaron and me resurfaced on our old university forum. Familiar usernames popped up in the comments, reigniting long-dormant discussions. Photos of Aaron carrying Zoe went viral almost immediately, alongside news of him assaulting a business partner and causing a project to fall apart. The dignified exit I had envisioned for myself? Ruined. My phone rang nonstop. Calls from Grace. My parents. Aaron's parents. I ignored them all, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window in my apartment. I lit a cigarette. The first drag was acrid, burning my throat and making my chest ache. I had given up smoking years ago. Now I wondered why I ever thought quitting was a good idea. Scrolling through the comments on the forum, I found myself laughing bitterly. I'll never believe in love again. How could my top campus couple end like this? 10 years. A whole 10 years. Aaron, and you ruined it all. They say men's love fades over time, while women's love grows. I didn't believe it before. But even Aaron couldn't resist a mistress. Wait, that girl looks familiar. Isn't she the one Aaron used to post about? The student she sponsored during college? Someone dug up Zoe's background. Unbelievable. It's like one of those farmer and the snake stories. Aaron helped her, only for Zoe to climb into her benefactor's bed. Honestly, I always thought there was something between them at work. But Aaron was so dazzling, top tier in every way. Who would have thought Aaron would get bored of gourmet meals and settle for garbage instead? Dogs eating garbage. It's in their nature. What's the point of love? Anyway, he cheated. After all, trash men should just disappear. Overnight, the forum thread gained more than 10,000 comments. On social media, the scandal surrounding Aaron's affair continued to dominate trending topics. Everyone speculated whether the Lynn and Aaron families would turn against each other over this. Then, Aaron posted a tweet. Lynn Aaron is my one true love. Forever. Our engagement remains intact. Don't believe or spread rumors. My finger hovered over the screen, typing and deleting my response multiple times before finally giving up. Instead, I pulled out the guest list from our engagement party. It was a painstakingly handwritten document that had taken me an entire week to perfect. Any mistake required rewriting the whole page because it was so important to me. Now, I realized how convenient digital invitations were. Being a socialite, especially one engaged to a family of equal status, wasn't easy. Even ending a relationship required a public statement. Wearing the wedding dress I had chosen myself, I stood on the stage. When I announced the annulment of our engagement, the crowd's faces changed dramatically. Because of Aaron's tweet, they had assumed Zoe's involvement was just another insignificant affair. No different from the tabloid-worthy scandals common in elite circles. They thought I had gathered them here, alongside reporters, to clarify the misunderstanding. Camera flashes blinded me, but thanks to rehearsals, I didn't flinch. I removed the ring Aaron had placed on my finger and set it down. Then, I shed the wedding gown, cut off my intricately styled hair, and said, "From now on, when you mention me, don't associate my name with Aaron. I am no longer his fiancée. I am Lynn Aaron. Not the Lynn of Lynn and Aaron, but Lynn of myself." When I got home, the house was filled with the acrid smell of smoke. Aaron was sitting on the couch, the ashtray on the coffee table overflowing with cigarette butts. "Zoe's emotional wounds have healed, so now you've come running back here?" I asked flatly. Breaking into someone's home without permission is trespassing. You know, I could press charges. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "Aaron, why are you being so ruthless? What was I to you these past 10 years? Just something to be discarded like trash." I sighed and opened the curtains, letting light flood the room. "Aaron," I said calmly, "you of all people know how long 10 years is. So why was it so easy for you to give your love to someone else?" I turned to him, my voice steady. "I've always wanted to ask, what was it like, those 4 years I was abroad? Keeping in touch with me while sneaking around with her? Did it feel good? Was it fun? Making a fool of me while I unknowingly wished you both happiness?" Thinking about it now, it felt like watching a puppet show from the audience, where I was the puppet all along. "Aaron, please don't go. Don't leave me," Aaron pleaded. "We can still have a future together." His words, once capable of stirring my heart, now left me unmoved. The waves of love I had once felt for him had turned into a stagnant, lifeless pool. "I'm done, Aaron," I said simply. After the official breakup, I poured all my energy into work, traveling for business, managing projects, and keeping myself so busy I had no time to think about anything else. My parents and close friends were worried I was overworking myself, afraid I would burn out. Grace, in particular, bombarded me with dozens of messages daily, and even called at night to remind me to get some sleep. "Check out this guy, Jason Xing," Grace texted. "Top-tier candidate. Super reliable. Aaron, even if you're not ready for a relationship, at least go on a date. Let Aaron know he's ancient history. Did he show up at your office again today?" Grace's voice came through the phone as I scrolled through the latest updates on the forum. Pictures of Aaron kept popping up daily despite my official announcement of our breakup. Aaron, however, wasn't ready to let go. Like 10 years ago, when he used to wait outside my classroom after school, he now waited outside my office building every day. He followed me as I walked, tailed my car, and often stayed parked outside my apartment complex all night. He even bought a property less than 100 meters from mine. Because of how frequently we were photographed together, rumors began swirling online that we were rekindling our relationship. Meanwhile, Zoe's situation took a nosedive. She was forcibly fired from Aaron's company amid the backlash of her homewrecker scandal. She was not only relentlessly criticized online, but also blacklisted in her industry. Anonymous users even discovered her address and started leaving funeral wreaths at her door. Grace, my ever-dedicated gossip reporter, kept me updated on all these developments. She spent most of her day online, keeping tabs on the drama involving Aaron and Zoe. Just as I finished reading her latest message, my phone rang again. "Ugh, you're so stubborn," Grace said, exasperated. "You can't let this scumbag ruin your entire life. You're not going to stay single forever because of him, are you?" I rubbed my temples. "Maybe you should worry about yourself for a change," I replied dryly. She let out a mischievous laugh. "Just wait. You'll see." I didn't understand what she meant until I finished work and stepped outside. That's when I saw him, Jason Xing. He stood there in a long coat, tall and handsome, just like in the pictures Grace had sent me earlier. As soon as he saw me, he walked over, taking the spot Aaron usually occupied. "Let me drive you home today," he said, his tone casual but confident. Aaron, who had been standing nearby, immediately froze. His face turned ashen, and the crease between his brows deepened. "Aaron, come home with me," Aaron said firmly. I glanced around and noticed a few people pretending to be passersby. Their phones were pointed directly at us. I couldn't help but smile. Without hesitation, I slipped my arm through Jason's. Aaron's face went completely pale. Jason turned to him with a grin. "See you later, ex-husband," he said cheerfully. His hand rested naturally on my shoulder as he led me to his car. Once we were out of Aaron's sight, he let go, albeit reluctantly. By the time we reached my apartment, the internet was already buzzing with new photos. The headlines read, Ex versus Current, the Love Triangle Showdown. Grace was ecstatic, flooding me with messages about how great Jason and I looked together. He's 3 years younger, but he's in your league. Plus, you two have so much in common. Both from the same social circle. Both just back from studying abroad. You'd make a perfect match. She gushed. I rolled my eyes and replied, Do you think I'm breeding livestock and adjusting genetics here? Jason, sitting next to me, turned his head slightly. You could consider me. Though, he said with a teasing smile. When I added him on social media, I received a message confirming a $5,000 transfer. Payment for what he jokingly called today's performance fee. I knew Grace just wanted me to move on, to leave Aaron behind and start fresh with someone new. But I wasn't as fragile as she thought. Aaron could love fiercely and let go just as decisively. After Jason's appearance, Aaron seemed to back off for a while. I thought our story had finally come to an end, that I was free of any lingering ties. I felt lighter, like a burden had been lifted. But the calm didn't last. A new trending topic disrupted the fragile peace. A group of adventurers posted a video online. It showed a man braving a heavy snowstorm, trudging uphill against all advice. His steps were labored, and he seemed determined to keep going despite the dangerous conditions. Someone recognized him. It was Aaron. The timestamp on the video matched his last social media post. Aaron's Aaron. Wishing for one more year with her. The adventurers explained that Aaron had insisted on climbing the mountain, but failed to return at the designated time. After searching for an entire day, rescue teams still hadn't found him. The internet erupted. Once again, Zoe and I were dragged into the narrative. Comments speculated endlessly about who her referred to. The eternal white moonlight, or just an occasional fleeting obsession? Zoe's not even a decent substitute for red string fate. How laughable. Aaron left decisively. Looks like Zoe was abandoned, too. The public discourse was relentless, dissecting every detail of our lives. People on the forums were relentless. Do they really think they can get married without being equals? Sleeping together a few times doesn't mean you can climb the social ladder. Someone even posted a photo of Zoe looking pale and haggard. The caption said it was taken in her hometown. After Aaron's affair was exposed, Zoe was immediately fired from the company. The scandal had spiraled out of control, turning her into a pariah. She was afraid to go out, terrified of being attacked. With no other options, she returned to her hometown. But the internet's reach knows no bounds. And even her village wasn't free of young people who knew the story. The tale of Zoe betraying her benefactor and stealing her sponsor's fiancé spread like wildfire. Everyone called her an ingrate. Her younger brother, now at the age to marry, became the center of her family's attention. Their patriarchal grandfather, as traditional as ever, began seeking older men willing to pay a high bride price for Zoe, so he could use the money to fund her brother's wedding. Zoe called me, crying. Aaron, she sobbed. I was wrong. Please, help me one more time. I held the phone to my ear, listening to her desperate pleas. After a long silence, I finally said, You've really let me down. 8 years. Zoe, 8 years. And you still don't know how to save yourself. I paused, considering my next words. Maybe this is just your fate. On the 4th day of the search, the rescue team found Aaron. The iron chains were slippery, and he had no climbing companions. He fell into a ravine. The thick snow cushioned his fall, saving his life. But the ordeal left permanent scars. Surviving 5 days in sub-zero temperatures caused irreparable damage to his body. His leg, which hit a rock during the fall, was never properly treated. He would never walk normally again. After being rescued, the first thing Aaron did was call me. His voice, hoarse and broken, sounded like that of an old man on his deathbed. Aaron, he rasped. You'll never forgive me, will you? I didn't respond. Please, he pleaded. Just talk to me. Aaron, I miss you so much. I looked out the window. Somewhere, fireworks were lighting up the night sky. The bursts of dazzling light faded quickly, leaving only darkness. much like the brilliance of my past with Aaron and the countless futures I once imagined with him. The night sky grew black again after the fireworks vanished, but in just a few hours, the sun would rise, and daylight would return. No one's life depends on someone else. The world keeps spinning, no matter who's missing from it. Aaron, I said softly, this is my answer. He didn't speak again. The silence stretched so long that I nearly forgot we were still on the call. Finally, he whispered one word. Okay. A few soft beeps signaled the end of the call. At the same time, my fingers pressed the keyboard, typing the final period on a project report. A report that closed both a chapter of work and the last 10 years of my life with Aaron. The first thing I did after being reborn in the 1980s was to go to town and find a fixer who made fake documents. I paid him to create a forged college acceptance letter. Then, I went to the post office and secretly swapped my real acceptance letter with the fake one. In my previous life, my boyfriend, Jake, and Zoe both got into college, but I didn't. Jake immediately broke up with me and went off to college with Zoe. I was left behind, stuck farming in the village, and became a target of ridicule from the locals. Years later, Zoe returned to the village with a group of classmates. That was when I learned that she had started using the name Evelyn. She had stolen my identity to attend college. When I confronted her, she and Jake teamed up to silence me, and I ended up dead because of them. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day the acceptance letters arrived. This time, I quietly went to town to have a fake acceptance letter made and, while the mailman wasn't looking, swapped it for my real one. Only after ensuring everything was in place did I return to the village. As I approached the village entrance, I saw Jake and Zoe waiting there. Jake spoke up first, his tone calm. Cheryl, the mailman will be here soon. Go home and wait. If there's an acceptance letter for you, I'll bring it over. In my previous life, I had foolishly trusted Jake and gone home to wait. Later, he told me I hadn't been accepted, and Zoe, despite her poor grades, claimed to have gotten into college. I believed him completely, unaware of the betrayal. On the day I died, Jake admitted that Zoe had paid him $200 to steal my acceptance letter. Years earlier, Jake had even proposed marriage to my family, claiming he would marry into my family and take my last name. He did this just to receive a $100 dowry from my parents. With that money, he managed to survive and attend college. Yet, for Zoe, he betrayed me without hesitation. Smiling, I nodded at Jake and returned home. Once inside, I looked at the acceptance letter in my hand and couldn't help but laugh. Zoe had no idea I'd already secured my acceptance letter. I knew her father was the village chief, and if I offended them now, life in the village would only become harder for me. For now, I had to endure. Once I got to college, I would deal with Zoe and Jake. After hiding my letter carefully, Jake and Zoe came to my house. Jake was the first to speak. Cheryl, you didn't get into college, he said, his voice slightly tense. In my previous life, I had been crushed by this news and completely failed to notice the nervousness in both Jake and Zoe. Now, I saw through them. They had planned this all along. If I didn't get in, then I'll just go find a job, I said, looking directly at Jake. My calmness seemed to catch him off guard, and I noticed him exchange a quick glance with Zoe. Their expressions relaxed visibly. Cheryl, I can help you find a job here in the village. You should stay, Zoe chimed in, clearly hoping to keep me from leaving. She was terrified that if I left, I'd uncover the truth about her stealing my identity. There's no need. I'll leave, I replied firmly. My words made Jake and Zoe's expressions change noticeably. Jake immediately tried to persuade me, saying, Cheryl, wouldn't it be better to work in the village? The people here will take care of you. No need, Jake. I'm going to find work elsewhere, I replied firmly, meeting his gaze. Despite their efforts, Jake and Zoe couldn't convince me and eventually left in frustration. After they were gone, I began packing my things. I knew I had to leave the village. If I stayed, they would keep targeting me, and I'd never get a chance to go to school. I packed my bags, determined to leave the next day, buy a bus ticket in town, and find work until it was time for school to start. But that night, Jake and Zoe came to see me again. Jake spoke first, his tone unusually serious. Cheryl, I'm here to break off our engagement. I smiled at him, unfazed. In my previous life, he had also come to break off our engagement at this exact time. After Zoe had paid him $200. Back then, he gave me $100, claiming it was to return the dowry my family had given him. I was too heartbroken to think clearly and handed over the signed engagement contract without a second thought. But this time, things were going to be different. You can break off the engagement, Jake, but the contract clearly states that if you do, you'll owe my family an additional $100 as compensation, I said calmly, looking straight at him. Jake froze at my words. He knew exactly what I was talking about. Years ago, to gain my family's trust, he had signed an agreement promising to marry into my family, without hesitation. He'd counted on my feelings for him, assuming that if he ever broke off the engagement, I wouldn't demand anything more from him. But now, having just received $200 from Zoe, Jake clearly couldn't bear to part with any of it. After all, he still needed money for college. Yet without paying, he wouldn't be able to retrieve the engagement contract. Zoe, standing beside him, couldn't hold back her anger. Cheryl, how dare you? Do you really think you're worthy of Jake? She yelled, pointing a finger at me. I shook my head and replied coldly, whether I'm worthy or not doesn't matter. What matters is that if Jake wants to break off the engagement, he has to pay. Of course, you can refuse, but if you do, I'll take this agreement to court. Let's see how that affects Jake's chances of attending college. As soon as I finished speaking, Jake's face turned pale. College was his priority, so he had no choice. Reluctantly, he handed me the $200 Zoe had given him. I took the money with a smile and handed over the engagement contract. Here's your contract, Jake. Take good care of it, I said, watching them leave. As soon as they were gone, I grabbed my bag and left in a hurry. I knew that once word got out that Jake had given me $200, the entire village would soon be talking about it. My father had passed away a year ago, and without a male figure in the family, we were vulnerable in the village. I couldn't afford to stay any longer. Under the cover of darkness, I quietly left the village and headed to town. There, I checked into a small guest house. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of relief. After arriving in the provincial capital, I found a job near the school while waiting for the semester to start. Soon, the first day of school arrived. That morning, I walked to the campus with my acceptance letter in hand. The moment I stepped through the gates, I saw Zoe, Jake, and Zoe's mother. Their faces were filled with shock when they spotted me, and I could clearly see the panic in Zoe's expression. Jake, on the other hand, wasted no time walking up to me, his tone sharp as he demanded, Cheryl, what are you doing here? I'm here to attend school, I replied calmly, meeting Jake's glare. What are you talking about, Cheryl? Jake's voice was laced with urgency, and I could see the unease on his face. You didn't even get into college. What are you doing here? Watching Jake's pathetic attempt at a performance, I couldn't help but smile. Before I could respond, Zoe's mother stepped in, her voice anxious. Cheryl, you didn't get into college. Why are you here? You should go back home immediately. She looked me up and down nervously before continuing. Have you run out of money from working these past few months? If that's the case, I'll give you $20. Just leave. I stared at the three of them for a moment before smiling slightly and saying, I'm just here to have a look. With that, I turned and walked toward the campus entrance. Seeing me head toward the school gates, Jake's expression changed dramatically. He reached out, trying to grab my arm, but I quickly shook him off. Standing right outside the school gates, I wasn't afraid of causing a scene. If he dared to make a move, I could always call for help. Fixing Jake with a cold stare, I said, Jake, I'm here to attend school. Why are you trying to stop me? Jake's face was full of desperation as he pleaded, Cheryl, stop this nonsense. You didn't get accepted. What are you doing here? Just go back home. His eyes carried a hint of warning. Jake, who are you to tell me what to do? Where I go has nothing to do with you. I shot back. Jake was stunned for a moment but quickly recovered. I'm your fiancé. Don't I have the right to care about you? He countered. Jake, It seems you've forgotten that you took back the engagement contract. We're no longer connected, I said, my voice steady. My words caused Jake's face to pale instantly. Without warning, Jake grabbed my arm again, his voice rising. Cheryl, I don't care what your reason is, but you shouldn't be here. I knew why he was so panicked. He had taken $200 from Zoe's family to help cover up their lies. If anyone found out he was involved in Zoe's scheme to steal my identity, he'd face serious consequences. His desperation was even more obvious than Zoe's. Looking at him, I chuckled softly and shoved him away. Jake, this has nothing to do with you. I'm going now. With that, I turned and walked toward the school entrance. As I moved forward, I heard Zoe's voice ring out coldly behind me. Cheryl, even if you get in, it'll be useless. You don't have an acceptance letter. You can't enroll. Zoe sneered, her confidence unshaken. I glanced at her coldly. She still had no idea what kind of trouble she had gotten herself into. Jake tried again to block my way, but I cut him off sharply. If you don't let me through, I'll call the police. My words froze Jake in his tracks. He knew full well that if he continued, it would only create more problems for him. Over the past month, his life had been particularly difficult. If the villagers hadn't lent him money, believing he'd repay them after getting into college, he wouldn't have survived. For years, Jake had relied on my family's support to focus on his studies. Now that I no longer funded him, his only option was to depend on Zoe's family. Seeing me continue toward the school gates, Jake grabbed my arm again, saying urgently, Cheryl, you can't go in. I turned to him, my expression icy. Jake, if you try to stop me again, I really will call the police. Hearing this, Jake's face turned even darker. By now, a group of students and teachers had noticed the commotion at the gate. Even the security guard was approaching us. What's going on here? The guard asked, looking between us. I'm here to attend school, but they're trying to stop me, I said clearly, pointing at Jake, Zoe, and her mother. As soon as I spoke, all eyes turned to them. Zoe's mother was quick to respond, her voice shrill. She's lying. She failed the entrance exam and didn't get into college. That's why we stopped her. She doesn't even have an acceptance letter. Zoe chimed in confidently. Exactly. She's trying to cheat her way in. Her tone was firm, and I knew why. She believed she held my real acceptance letter, the one she'd stolen. What she didn't know was that I had already swapped it out. The letter in her hands was the fake I had planted. The security guards turned to me, and I calmly pulled out my acceptance letter. This is my acceptance letter, I said, holding it up. As soon as I did, the color drained from Zoe's and Jake's faces. Zoe, in particular, shouted, That's impossible. Her wide eyes were fixed on the letter in my hand, and she quickly turned to Jake, her panic evident. Even Jake was stunned, staring at me in disbelief. That letter must be fake, Jake yelled before lunging toward me, trying to snatch the letter from my hand. I quickly stepped behind the security guard, shouting, They're trying to steal my acceptance letter. Hearing this, the guards immediately restrained Jake. He struggled, shouting, Her letter is fake. Don't be fooled. By now, the commotion had drawn a large crowd, including some school staff. A teacher approached, and I handed him the letter. This is my acceptance letter. Please verify if it's genuine, I said calmly. The teacher examined the letter carefully, along with a few others. After a moment, they all confirmed, This is an authentic acceptance letter. I turned to the staff and added, They've been trying to take my letter and stop me from enrolling. I hope the school can call the police. Hearing this, the teachers turned to Jake and Zoe's family, their gazes sharp. One of them immediately pulled out a phone to call the authorities. Zoe, visibly panicked, shouted, Don't believe her. My acceptance letter is the real one. She held up her letter, thrusting it toward the staff. Watching this, I couldn't help but smile. Zoe was truly foolish. She didn't realize that presenting a forged document could land her in legal trouble, or even jail. When Zoe handed her acceptance letter to the teachers, they froze as they examined it. Confusion spread across their faces as they looked at the name on the letter. Who here is Cheryl? One of them asked, clearly puzzled. I smiled calmly and took out my household registration booklet, handing it to the teacher. "I am Cheryl," I said confidently. That moment, Zoe's voice rang out, loud and frantic. "No, I am Cheryl," she shouted, glaring at me with hostility. "I am Cheryl," she repeated, her voice rising in desperation. The teachers exchanged glances. Realizing the situation was far from simple, we were all escorted to the principal's office, and soon the police and officials from the Department of Education arrived. The matter had escalated quickly. Forging documents and impersonating someone to attend college was a serious offense that the Education Bureau could not ignore. I sat calmly in the office, facing Jake, Zoe, and her mother. All three of them stared daggers at me, their anger and panic evident. Jake's expression was particularly livid as he glared at me with fury. I met their gazes coldly, saying nothing, breaking the silence. Jake demanded, "Cheryl, what exactly are you trying to do?" "I just want to reclaim my academic status," I replied with a mocking smile, looking him directly in the eye. Jake fell silent, but Zoe's mother quickly took over, her tone sharp and threatening. "Cheryl, if you admit right now that your acceptance letter is fake, our family is willing to give you $200. Otherwise, you know the consequences. My husband is the village chief." She looked at me coldly, as though her words were a final warning. For years, Zoe's mother had flaunted her husband's position as village chief to intimidate others. But outside the village, that so-called authority held no weight. She clearly didn't understand the magnitude of the situation. If anything, this scandal might cost her husband his position entirely. Seeing her futile attempt at intimidation, I chuckled lightly. Zoe's mother's face darkened as she realized her threat wasn't working. She glared at me viciously. While I remained calm and collected, Zoe suddenly spoke up, unable to hold back her desperation. "Cheryl, where did you get that acceptance letter?" she demanded, clearly trying to find a flaw in my story. Her question only highlighted her ignorance. Did she not understand that even if my letter were fake, I was still the real Cheryl? The academic record belonged to me. She was the imposter. And besides, my acceptance letter was genuine. Jake looked visibly shaken, his face pale with fear. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but I ignored him. Just as he was about to speak, the door to the office swung open. A group of officials entered, their serious expressions emphasizing the gravity of the situation. Among them were administrators wearing official jackets. I smiled, knowing the situation had now escalated beyond Zoe's family's control. It was the 1980s, and such scandals rarely saw the light of day. But even in this era, this incident had caused a stir. If this were the future, it would have already gone viral online. The officials sat down, their gazes scanning the room. One of them asked sternly, "Who here is Cheryl?" Before I could respond, Zoe jumped to her feet, her voice loud and confident. I'm Cheryl." She turned to the officials with a smug expression. "Have you figured it out yet? This person here is the imposter. I've been saying all along that she's the fake one, and I'm the real Cheryl." I remained silent, letting her dig her own grave. Then, I calmly handed my household registration booklet to the officials. "I am Cheryl," I stated firmly. "Additionally, I am formally filing a report. The village chief in our town tampered with my academic record to ensure his daughter could attend college." I began, my tone steady. "He changed her name to mine and withheld my acceptance letter without my consent." As my words sank in, the expressions of the officials darkened noticeably. Before anyone could respond, Zoe burst out laughing, her voice filled with mockery. "Cheryl, you just admitted my dad withheld your acceptance letter. That means the one in your hand must be fake. Arrest her already," she exclaimed, her tone hysterical. Her outrageous outburst left everyone in the room stunned. Teachers, officials, and even the police. They didn't need to investigate further to realize the absurdity of the situation. It was hard to believe someone like Zoe could have legitimately gained admission to college. In her frenzy, she had essentially admitted to the crime, confirming that my acceptance letter had indeed been withheld. The officials turned to me, their expressions serious. "Cheryl, if that's the case, can you explain how your acceptance letter turned out to be genuine?" I sighed and recounted everything. How I had swapped my acceptance letter for a forged one to ensure my safety and left the village quietly. I knew this admission wouldn't harm me, but it certainly painted the village chief's family in a worse light. After all, if I hadn't taken those steps, I would have lost my academic record entirely. Jake's face turned pale as he glanced nervously at the officials, clearly wanting to say something but too terrified to speak. Meanwhile, Zoe and her mother continued shouting, their voices filled with indignation. Cheryl, you're despicable. You're nothing but a thief. Why are you all just standing there? Arrest her already. My husband is the village chief. Zoe's mother yelled, her arrogance palpable. I couldn't help but feel exasperated by her delusions. Zoe's mother, who had spent decades throwing her weight around in the village, didn't understand that here. No one cared about a village chief's authority. The officials ignored her completely and instead addressed me. Cheryl, we understand your situation now, one of the officials said. However, we need time to verify all the details. Rest assured, as long as your identity is legitimate, you'll be allowed to enroll in the university. For now, though, neither you nor the others involved can proceed with enrollment. With that, the officials turned to Zoe and her mother. The same applies to you. You'll need to wait for the investigation to conclude. I glanced at Jake, who was cowering in a corner, trembling and unable to speak. When he noticed me looking at him, his eyes were filled with a pleading desperation. He knew he was deeply implicated in this mess. I pointed at him and said to the officials, Jake was the one who took my acceptance letter and handed it over to the village chief. He also accepted $200 from the chief's family in exchange. My words caused Jake's face to drain of color completely. The officials immediately acted, taking him into custody as well. That evening, arrangements were made for all of us to stay in the school dormitories. According to the officials, they needed more time to thoroughly investigate the situation before allowing me to enroll. However, it was clear to everyone that I was the victim in this case. Compared to me, Zoe didn't resemble a college student in the slightest. Zoe and her mother were confined to a separate dormitory, but even then, Zoe's mother continued to create a scene. Her voice echoed through the halls as she screamed, "We're here to attend school. How dare you stop my daughter from enrolling and keep us locked up? Do you know my husband is the village chief?" I could hear Zoe's mother shouting from the next dorm room. Her voice was so loud it carried through the thin walls. I shook my head, sighing. Arguing with someone as unreasonable as her was pointless. Zoe's mother continued her tantrum, with Zoe chiming in from time to back her up. Eventually, the police arrived and took them both away for causing a public disturbance. Over the next 2 days, I stayed in the dormitory. During that time, Jake attempted to see me numerous times, but each time, someone blocked him. I knew he was genuinely scared now, but all of this was a consequence of his own actions. For the sake of money, he chose Zoe, and now he had to pay the price. On the morning of the 3rd day, I saw a school administrator waiting at the door of my dormitory. He informed me that the investigation was complete. It turned out that Zoe and her family hadn't even put much effort into their scheme. They had simply changed Zoe's name to mine and left everything else untouched. The officials from the Department of Education, upon arriving in our town, quickly uncovered the truth. After all, Zoe only changed her name after receiving the acceptance letter. Furthermore, the school staff already knew who I was. With testimonies from my teachers and classmates, combined with the timeline discrepancy of Zoe's name change, the authorities worked overnight to detain the village chief. That day, we were all taken to the police station. There, I saw the entire village chief's family, Zoe, her mother, and even Jake. They had been arrested 2 days earlier for causing a disturbance and were now being held together with the village chief. When they spotted me, their eyes burned with hatred, but I ignored them. I knew their fates were sealed. Prison awaited them. The police explained everything. We've confirmed that the village chief and his family stole your academic record. Additionally, Jake intercepted your acceptance letter and handed it over to them. They will all face the appropriate consequences. An officer informed me. I thanked them sincerely. As I was about to leave, Jake suddenly called out to me, "Cheryl, if you don't press charges against me and give me a letter of forgiveness, we can still be together," he pleaded. I turned to look at him, amused. Jake, do you really think that's possible? I asked, a faint smile playing on my lips. Cheryl, I'll agree to marry into your family this time. No dowry needed. He continued shamelessly. And I'm a college student. Once I graduate, our life will definitely improve. I know you still like me. I'll even write a pledge, promising to love you forever. I shook my head, incredulous. What good would a man like Jake do me? Jake, do you think a letter of forgiveness will solve everything? Even if I wrote one, it wouldn't change a thing now. You're not worth forgiving, I said, turning and walking away. Behind me, Jake desperately called my name, but I didn't look back. I finally enrolled in college as I had always dreamed of in my previous life. This time, I was determined to work harder than ever, knowing how difficult it had been to get here. Few days later, the police visited the school to inform me of the sentences handed down. Jake was convicted of intercepting my academic record and, due to his poor character, was expelled from school and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Zoe and her mother faced the same sentence, 2 years behind bars. As for the village chief, his case was far more serious. The police uncovered that, in addition to stealing my academic record, he had also embezzled public funds from the community. The village chief had not only stolen villagers' land, but had also abused his position for years to oppress them. Once it became clear he wouldn't return, the villagers came forward to expose all his past misdeeds. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, ensuring he'd spend the rest of his life behind bars. The police informed me that Jake wanted to see me. Out of curiosity, I agreed to meet him at the detention center. The moment he saw me, he broke down in tears. Cheryl, I know I was wrong. Can you forgive me? He sobbed miserably, his voice pleading. I merely smiled, offering no response. I no longer cared enough about Jake to waste my words. Sensing my indifference, he suddenly said, Cheryl, wait for me. When I get out, I'll marry you. I shook my head and replied firmly, Jake, there's nothing between us anymore. I only came here to tell you that I will never forgive you. It's best we never meet again. With that, I turned and walked away, ignoring his calls behind me. 2 years later, while I was still in school, someone told me that Jake had come looking for me. Without hesitation, I said, that man is my enemy. Don't let him in. Jake was turned away, and I never returned to that village. After graduating, I started working. It was the height of the entrepreneurial wave, and I took the opportunity to establish my own company. My business grew rapidly, and soon my name became well known in the town. The local officials invited me back to the village to invest, and I agreed. I returned with an entourage of bodyguards and secured a plot of land just outside the village to build a factory. My arrival caused quite a stir among the villagers, who were astonished at how much I had changed. None of them had expected the girl who left years ago to return as a successful businesswoman, accompanied by bodyguards. The villagers eagerly shared updates about the former village chief's family. Zoe and her mother had suffered greatly in prison. Zoe's mother, notorious for her sharp tongue, had been beaten so severely that she became mentally impaired. Zoe, caught in her mother's troubles, was assaulted in prison and had her arm broken. After being released, she was forced to marry an old widower in the village who was an alcoholic. He frequently beat her, leaving her in constant pain and misery. She couldn't divorce him, as she had no income and relied on his meager earnings to survive. The villagers also told me that Zoe's family blamed Jake for their downfall. Zoe even went to Jake's house to demand compensation. Hearing this, her abusive husband followed her there. Jake, now destitute, couldn't pay a cent and was beaten by the widower so severely that his leg was broken. He didn't even dare to call the police. As I listened to the villagers' stories, I glanced toward the crowd in the distance. Among them, I spotted a man leaning heavily on a crutch, his face dark with resentment and shame. It was Jake. His life was now a shadow of what it had been, consumed by regret and humiliation. Meanwhile, my life had only grown brighter. The first story has concluded. We invite you to listen to the second story. In the 6th year of my relationship with Ethan, I decided to let go. His white moonlight had returned from abroad, and I finally learned that this woman, Lucy, was my half-sister. All along, I had been nothing but a stand-in. With just a few careless words from Lucy, Ethan abandoned me, leaving me gravely ill and on the brink of death in the hospital. He even forced me to kneel and apologize to her. After I walked away, Ethan shamelessly declared, "Yara will never leave me, and even if she does, I won't care." I dialed my mother's number. "Mom, I've decided to come home and get married," I said. On the day I agreed to marry someone else, Ethan showed up at the ceremony in utter despair. He begged me in a low voice, "Yara, please come back to me. Can we go back to how we used to be? Promise this time, I'll marry you." "Mississippi Mr. Chan has had too much to drink," the server explained. I frowned. Ethan had never been drunk before. Not once in the 6 years we'd been together. He was always composed, cold and rational, like a block of ice, no matter the occasion or company. Checking the address, I realized it was nearby. I decided to go. Soon, I stood outside the private room, my hand raised to knock. But just as I was about to, I caught the low murmur of conversation from inside. "Don't you think Yara looks a lot like her?" a male voice asked, tinged with curiosity. Hearing my name, my hand froze mid-air. Instinctively, I stopped, holding my breath. "You mean her?" another voice responded with a laugh. "Come on, everyone knows the truth. Yara's just a stand-in that Ethan found to replace her." My heart skipped a beat, then began pounding wildly. My body stiffened as a cold chill ran through me. A stand-in? A replacement? Whose replacement? If it weren't for her coming back today, do you think Ethan would have drunk this much? The first voice continued. Did you see the tears at the corner of his eyes? The last time he lost control like this was 6 years ago, when she left. The conversation went on, each word piercing deeper. After she got married 6 years ago, Ethan was a wreck for the longest time. It wasn't until he met Yara that he started to seem alive again. They've been together for 6 years now. Who knows? Maybe Ethan does have some genuine feelings for her. I stood frozen in place, my face growing paler by the second. Inside, felt as though a string, wound too tightly, had snapped violently, leaving me empty and powerless. I'd bet anything Ethan's never let her go, another voice declared, confident and sure. Hasn't he been secretly keeping tabs on her all these years? Every year, he flies over there to see her. Look at him now. The moment she divorced and came back, he completely fell apart. Outside the door, it felt as though my blood had stopped flowing. 6 years. 6 long years. He had never made me promises, but I had always believed that what we shared was real, that we had a future together. But now I understood. Everything I'd held on to was just him trying to fill the emptiness she had left behind. I was nothing more than a replacement. 6 years ago, when I first met Ethan, he was relentless in pursuing me, claiming it was love at first sight. His persistence wore down the walls I'd built around myself, and eventually, I accepted the warmth he offered. Ethan never outright told me he loved me, but his actions had always seemed to say I was special to him. From sending me flowers to keeping me company during long, lonely nights, he made me believe our bond was solid, unique. 6 years was long enough for me to trust that he wanted to build a future with me, to share a life together. But looking back, I realized those 6 years were filled with excuses. He never publicly acknowledged our relationship, never brought me home to meet his family. I'm 28 now. Every time I brought up marriage, he would deflect, saying, "Let's wait a little longer." Over time, I stopped dreaming of weddings and futures. Inside the room, the voices continued. I snapped back to reality. Every year, Ethan's so-called business trips turned out to be visits to another woman. His reluctance to go public with our relationship was because he was waiting for her. His refusal to marry me was because he wanted to marry someone else. The voices inside the room continued, but I couldn't bear to listen anymore. Eventually, I helped him home. Ethan leaned heavily on my shoulder, half conscious, his vulnerable and helpless expression striking a stark contrast to the man I thought I knew. 6 years of love, only to discover I was nothing more than a substitute. The thought brought tears to my eyes, and they spilled over before I could stop them. My phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. It was my mother. I took a deep breath and answered. "Yara, have you thought about what I mentioned last time? The man I've chosen for you is excellent. You should at least meet him." she said. My mother had no idea about my relationship with Ethan and had been arranging a marriage for me back home. Until now, I'd always refused, thinking I would eventually introduce Ethan to my family and marry him. When I didn't respond, she changed the subject. Oh, by the way, Lucy and that man she married divorced and returned to the country. She hasn't bothered you, has she? You know how unreasonable she can be. I was worried she might come looking for you and cause trouble. Lucy was technically my older half-sister. 7 years ago, my father, who had hidden his late-stage cancer diagnosis, passed away. It was only at his funeral that we learned he had been unfaithful and fathered a daughter older than me with another woman. After my father's death, Lucy and her mother tried to claim part of our family estate, not knowing that the wealth was all my mother's. My father had been what you'd call a phoenix man, someone who married into wealth. Despite this, my mother, out of pity, gave Lucy's mother some money and even introduced Lucy to a good man when she was 22. I'd heard that Lucy had lived well after her marriage, so I had no idea why she had divorced and returned. Mom, I'll think about it, I replied, steering the conversation back to her first question. I wanted to give Ethan another chance. One last chance. After hanging up, I tossed my phone aside. 6 years of love wasn't something I could easily let go of. My heart was a mess, and I clung to the hope that he might still choose me. The next day was our 6th anniversary. As usual, Ethan had reserved a table at an upscale restaurant. I planned to use this opportunity to bring up marriage again. If he agreed, I would pretend nothing had happened, but just as I was about to speak, his phone rang. He answered it hurriedly and left, saying he'd be back soon. Left sitting alone, I felt it was pointless to stay any longer and decided to leave. As I stepped out of the restaurant, a familiar figure blocked my path. Yara, it's really you, said Lucy. I looked up, confused. What was she doing here? Lucy chuckled softly, a hint of mockery in her tone. So, this is your plan. You and your mother, always taking what doesn't belong to you and pretending to be innocent. Her words confused and angered me. What are you talking about? I asked. You think you're the only woman in his life? She continued, her gaze piercing through me like a knife. You're wrong. He's never cared about you. You're just a placeholder, filling the void in his heart until the real woman returned. I froze, her words hitting every tender spot I had. The woman Ethan truly loves is back now, Lucy said, her voice cold and cutting. You'd better step aside. The anger inside me erupted instantly. Confronting Lucy, I demanded, what do you mean by that? But before I could process her response, she abruptly shoved me without hesitation. Caught off guard, I lost my balance and staggered backward, falling into the swimming pool. Cold water rushed into my throat as I struggled to breathe, my heart pounding wildly. Fear surged through me like a tidal wave, overwhelming every sense. I instinctively flailed my arms, desperately trying to grab onto something, anything. Instead, I accidentally latched onto Lucy's arm, and with a scream, she lost her balance and fell into the pool with me. The water splashed violently as we both plunged in. The icy cold enveloped me, tugging at my body, amplifying my panic. My mind raced with countless anxious thoughts. That moment, I saw Ethan sprinting toward us in a frenzy. Memories of 3 years ago flooded back to me. The time I had nearly drowned trying to save him, coming so close to losing my life. Since then, I'd been terrified of water, and Ethan knew that. He had to save me. I used all my strength to wave at him, calling for help, but his gaze never once landed on me. Instead, he rushed straight to Lucy, wrapping her in his arms and pulling her out of the pool. That moment, it felt like my heart was being shattered by a hammer. Eventually, staff members helped me out of the water, soaked and trembling from the cold. I staggered to my feet, my blurred vision cleared enough to see Ethan still holding Lucy tightly, his voice gentle and soothing. Lucy, it's okay. You're back now. I won't let anything hurt you again, he murmured softly. Lucy nestled pitifully into his embrace, her voice tinged with affection. It's been 6 years. Ethan, I've missed you so much. I stood frozen, each word stabbing into my chest like a blade. So this was it. Lucy was the white moonlight Ethan had never let go of. I was nothing more than her substitute. You pushed her. Ethan's voice thundered in my ears, filled with undeniable anger. Don't blame her. Ethan, Lucy said weakly, her tearful eyes glancing at me with feigned innocence laced with provocation. I just came over to say hello. She pushed me into the pool and then jumped in herself. My health has always been fragile, but I understand her. As your girlfriend, it's normal for her to feel hostile toward me, given how much we look alike. I'm fine. Ethan, please forgive her for my sake. Without hesitation, Ethan believed her. His gaze turned cold and distant as he looked at me. Apologize to Lucy, he commanded. My heart sank into an abyss. I opened my mouth to explain, but the icy indifference in his eyes silenced me. He had chosen her side without a second thought. Fine, I whispered, my voice devoid of emotion. I'm sorry. The words felt hollow, draining the last bit of strength from me. With those 3 simple words, all I felt was cold and broken. Without another glance at Ethan, I turned and walked away. Back home, I called my mother. Mom, I've decided. I agreed to the arranged marriage. I entered my room, and without hesitation, began packing my things. Truthfully, I didn't have much that truly belonged to me. My fingers brushed lightly over the suitcase. Memories of the days Ethan and I had shared flashing through my mind. Now, they all seemed like a cruel joke. Ethan didn't come home that night. He was likely staying over at Lucy's. Absent-mindedly, I picked up my phone and scrolled through social media. Sure enough, there it was. A post from Lucy. She and Ethan were wearing matching bracelets, smiling so sweetly in the photo. I let out a bitter laugh as I finished packing. In 6 years, Ethan and I had never had anything like this. He'd always dismissed the idea of shared couples items, calling them childish and immature, saying it would make people laugh at us. Just as I was dragging my suitcase to leave, Ethan appeared in the doorway. His expression was devoid of warmth. I know everything now, he said coldly. So you're the one he was talking about. The sister who bullied him, whose mother ruined his family, forced him out of his home, and arranged for him to marry. Then you show up to seduce me. Also you can be with me? 6 years. You've been lying to me this whole time. You've really pulled out all the stops. I froze, the words cutting deeper with every accusation. Yesterday, you even pushed Lucy into the pool, making her sick. I had no idea you were such a calculating woman, he continued, his voice sharp and filled with disappointment. I just came back to grab something. You'd better go apologize to Lucy and beg for her forgiveness. Otherwise, we're done. His eyes, cold and devoid of any affection, bore into me. Fine, I said hoarsely, my voice barely audible. Without another glance, Ethan picked up what he needed and left in a hurry, never noticing the suitcase at my side. I watched his figure disappear before dragging my suitcase out of the house and getting into a cab. When I arrived home, I fell ill. My weakened immunity after falling into the pool made a small cold escalate into a relentless high fever. My mom rushed me to the hospital in a panic. In my feverish haze, I received a call from Ethan, his tone furious. I told you to apologize to Lucy. Why haven't you done it yet? This is your last chance. I mean it. I'll break up with you for real. A deep sadness welled up inside me, but at the same time, I felt relief. At least I had decided to let him go the day before. I'm sick, I said, my voice raspy from the fever. Ethan paused, his tone shifting slightly to one of concern. Where are you? I'll come to you right now. Before I could respond, I heard Lucy's voice in the background. Ethan, is something wrong with Yara? I want to go with you to check on her. Her tone was light, but her words dripped with manipulation. Lucy continued, feigning concern. You know how she is. She's always pulling stunts like this. Remember how she pretended to be sick before to get her dad to come back? She's just doing this to mess with you. If you go, she'll act more pitiful than anyone. But what if she's actually sick? Let me come with you. Ethan. Then, in a suddenly exaggerated voice, she said, Oh no, Ethan. I think I sprained my ankle. I didn't hear Ethan's reply, but when he spoke again, his tone was ice cold. Yara, he snapped. You're always pulling this kind of act. Even after all these years, you haven't changed. Last time, you did the same thing. calling me and making me come back from a business trip. His words crushed whatever little hope I still had. This time, even if you're on your deathbed, you still need to come and apologize to Lucy. His words echoed in my mind. I suddenly remembered an incident from our first year together. I had been working late, alone, and on my way home, I was followed by a stranger. Panicked, I called Ethan. He didn't arrive until the next day, by which time I had already filed a report at the police station. Seeing his tired face after a long journey, I lied to him, saying I had just wanted to see him and that nothing had happened. I never imagined that kind lie would become a blade he'd use to cut me down. Hearing Ethan's increasingly cold tone now, I felt a sharp pain in my heart. I tried desperately to hold back tears, to speak, but my voice was barely a whisper. "Stop playing these tricks in front of me," Ethan snapped, his voice colder than ever. "It's useless. Be smart and go apologize to Lucy immediately. You owe her that. I'm not trying to make this harder for you." His cruel words felt like a knife cutting through me. Finally, the call ended. Ethan would never believe me when it came to Lucy. In her presence, his trust in me disappeared entirely. The fever and pain spread through my body, pulling me into darkness again. I don't know how much time passed, but when I opened my eyes, I heard my mother's familiar voice beside me. She had stayed by my bedside for hours. "Yara, you're awake. Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" she asked. Her eyes filled with worry. The concern in her gaze broke through the wall I had built around my emotions. Tears poured down uncontrollably as I whispered weakly, "Mom, I'm in so much pain. I'm so tired. I want to go home. I don't want to stay in the hospital anymore." Everything around me blurred. My mother didn't know what had happened, but she gently patted my hand, her voice soft with endless comfort. "It's okay, Yara. Once you're feeling better, we'll leave the hospital, and I'll take you home," she promised. The following days passed in a haze. Other than brief exchanges with the doctors and nurses, I spoke only with my mother about mundane topics. The rest of the time, I stayed in bed, my eyes sore, my mind clouded. Ethan's cold words and indifferent face haunted me, making the world around me feel like it was crumbling. Then one day, my mother brought someone with her. Gabriel Shu. "Yara, I've been busy with work these past few days, so I asked Gabriel to come take care of you," she said. I looked up at Gabriel, momentarily stunned, while ignoring my mother's almost mischievous gaze. He was my high school classmate. It had been years since we last saw each other. Back then, I had silently liked him, even planning to confess after graduation. But before I could, family issues took him abroad for college, and my crush faded away quietly. "Yara, it's been a long time," Gabriel said with a warm smile. "Your mom told me you were in the hospital. I came to see you," Gabriel said, standing at the foot of my hospital bed. His smile was warm, carrying a maturity and steadiness that overlapped with the youthful image of him in my memories. I nodded, feeling calm. "It's been a while," he said, his tone light, as he sat down beside me. From his bag, he took out an apple and began peeling it with practiced ease. I froze for a moment. Gabriel had always known I liked this variety of apple. Back in high school, he often brought them to school for me. "Do you still like these apples?" he asked, smiling as he peeled. I forced a small smile. "I used to when I was a kid. Now it's just a habit." I tried to compose myself, to appear more put together than I felt. Gabriel didn't respond right away. He simply handed me the neatly peeled apple, his eyes glistening slightly. "You've lost a lot of weight." I took the apple, noticing how meticulously it had been peeled, every cut precise, as if he'd done it countless times before. "How have you been lately?" I asked, attempting to break the lingering awkwardness between us. "I heard you've been running your family's business these past few years." "It's been all right. After taking over, I've been working hard to expand it. Things are going well now, and I'm not as busy as I used to be," he replied with a touch of self-deprecation. "But in the beginning, it was tough. I had to handle everything myself." I nodded lightly, unsure of what to say. Silence crept back between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. From that day on, Gabriel visited me every day. He didn't just bring apples. He brought care and companionship. Often, as I watched him busy himself, I found myself lost in thought. His attentiveness moved me, and his presence gradually eased the pain of my recent heartbreak. Yet, in the quiet hours of the night, memories of that failed relationship would return. I couldn't help but wonder, was I truly worthy of being loved? Yara. Gabriel suddenly called my name softly, breaking me out of my thoughts. I looked up sharply, meeting his gaze, and felt a sudden pang in my chest. His eyes held a deep understanding, as though he could see straight into my soul. No matter what happened in the past, you deserve to be cherished, he said gently. Tears threatened to spill from my eyes, but I bit my lower lip and smiled, trying to mask the storm of emotions inside me. Gabriel didn't press me further. He simply patted my shoulder lightly, his gaze filled with warmth and encouragement. Just make the choices that feel right for you, whether in love or in life. I nodded, though my heart swelled with emotions I couldn't quite name. Not long after, I was discharged from the hospital. On the day of my discharge, my mom made time to pick me up. She watched how naturally Gabriel and I interacted, a faint, contented smile tugging at her lips. Gabriel, sensing my mom wanted to talk to me, excused himself to speak with the doctor, leaving us some time alone. Once he was out of earshot, my mom leaned in and asked quietly, "So, what do you think of the fiancé I picked for you? His looks and physique are excellent." "Sure. But more importantly, he's done really well for himself these past few years. You wouldn't have had to come all the way to this hospital if it weren't for him. He even helped us a lot while you were sick." I froze. "Fiancé? Are you talking about Gabriel?" My disbelief was written all over my face as I looked at my mother. She nodded with a gentle smile. "Yes, Gabriel is your fiancé. Don't you remember? You two were high school classmates," she teased lightly. "Over the years, he's made quite a name for himself. He's brought the family business to new heights. And in a city, he's someone you can't ignore. Seeing how well you two get along, I feel relieved." My mind went blank, and I stood there, stunned. Instinctively, I asked, "He's not married yet?" Mom paused briefly before continuing. 7 years ago, his family faced a financial crisis. As an only son, the burden fell entirely on him. He was so busy stabilizing the situation that he didn't have time to think about personal matters. Forget marriage. He didn't even have a girlfriend. He worked tirelessly, and his efforts paid off. The Gabriel family has not only recovered but is doing even better than before. Hearing this, I couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration. Gabriel's journey over the years had clearly been anything but easy. My thoughts wandered back to high school, to the image of him as a gentle yet slightly melancholic teenager. That boy seemed worlds apart from the composed and mature man I saw now. Over the years, people have introduced potential matches to him, but he always declined. Mom continued, "Then, when I mentioned you, he agreed right away. You're lucky, Yara. Your future looks bright with him." Her words made my cheeks flush slightly, and I couldn't explain why. It wasn't resistance. It was warmth, an inexplicable comfort. "But don't feel pressured," Mom added quickly, her voice sincere. "If you don't like him, I'll decline on your behalf. It's no big deal. Your happiness matters the most." I hesitated for a moment before softly replying, "It's fine. I'm willing." I couldn't explain why, but the thought of trying again with Gabriel felt right. If he was willing, then so was I. Mom's laughter was filled with delight, and her joy made me feel slightly bashful. Turning my gaze toward Gabriel, I saw him standing nearby, speaking with the doctor. He wore a simple shirt and trousers. His sleeves rolled up to reveal his lean, strong forearms. Everything about him was clean, composed, and efficient. He had a strikingly handsome face, with deep-set, refined features. His eyes held a calm intelligence, and his lips curved slightly into a faint, effortless smile. It was as if no matter what he faced, he could handle it with ease. Mom followed my gaze and smiled knowingly. "Look at Gabriel. He's so outstanding. It's not just about his family background. He's accomplished so much on his own. The Gabriel business is expanding more and more, and he's the epitome of a successful man. You two will be very happy together." She patted my hand gently. "Don't worry. The Liu family isn't lacking, either. This marriage isn't just a collaboration. He's a good man, someone you can trust with your life. And if it doesn't work out, Mom will always be here to take care of you. Your happiness is all that matters. After my discharge, Gabriel came to pick us up. Meanwhile, Ethan returned home, only to find an eerily empty house. The place felt cold, lifeless. Many of the items that had belonged to me were gone. Even the slippers I always wore had vanished. Ethan frowned, scanning the empty room. A vague sense of irritation crept into his chest. Did she leave in a huff? He muttered, shaking his head with a faint, dismissive smile, pulling out his phone. He dialed Yara's number, but the only response was the cold, automated message informing him that the number had been blocked. For a moment, he froze, his brows furrowing slightly. The unease in his chest deepened, but he quickly brushed it off. She's probably just throwing a tantrum, he muttered to himself. Yara's always been like this. She acts out and then comes back. Putting the phone down, he leaned back on the sofa, his expression unfocused. He murmured under his breath, always pulling little stunts to get my attention. Ethan's mind wandered back to the past few days at the hospital, where he had been by Lucy's side. She was still the same, her delicate smile soft and her gaze warm, filled with nostalgia as she recounted sweet memories from their youth. Every time he looked at her, he felt a deep, lingering affection that he couldn't shake. It was as if he had returned to the beautiful days of their youth. Ethan, Lucy had said with a gentle smile, leaning weakly against the hospital bed. Her voice was filled with tenderness and trust. Do you remember where we first met? Under the cherry blossom tree. You told me that when we grew up, you'd take me to see the most beautiful cherry blossoms in the world. Ethan paused, a complex wave of emotions washing over him. He held her hand gently and replied, "Of course, I remember. I've never forgotten." In that moment, he was completely lost in the warmth of the memory. Yet, in the fleeting moments of clarity, thoughts of Yara surfaced, of the woman who had silently stayed by his side during his lowest moments, the one who had never asked for recognition, never demanded a title, and always catered to his whims and selfishness. A pang of guilt struck him, and he whispered to himself, "Yara, I was wrong to treat you the way I did because of Lucy, but even if I stood up for Lucy, was it really wrong? Yara's always been forgiving. Would she really leave me after all these years?" His thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his phone. It was Lucy. He answered quickly, hearing her soft, almost playful voice on the other end. "Ethan, can you come over today? I'm feeling unwell and a little lonely." The idea of going to Yara to explain things disappeared instantly. His voice softened as he comforted her. "Don't worry. I'll be there right away." Lucy chuckled lightly. "You're so good to me, Ethan. I knew you wouldn't abandon me." Hanging up the phone, Ethan muttered to himself, "I need to take care of Lucy first. She's in a vulnerable place right now." Without hesitation, he grabbed his keys and headed out the door, making his way to Lucy's house. Over the past few days, Ethan had been spending most of his time with Lucy, drawn into her nostalgic recollections of their past. Her words and expressions made him feel as though nothing had changed, as if they had been transported back to their youthful dreams. "Yara has been so loyal to me all these years," he mumbled to himself one day when a friend asked about her. His hand tightened unconsciously, but his lips curved into a faint smile. "But a white moonlight will always be a white moonlight. Lucy is the one who has always had my heart." He convinced himself that once Lucy was settled, he would return to Yara and explain everything. For now, Lucy was his priority. Ethan had always thought Yara was obedient and wouldn't truly leave him. As he arrived at his office and prepared to sit down, his phone buzzed with a notification. Glancing at the screen, he saw an anonymous email. Out of curiosity, he opened it. The email contained an audio recording attached to an image. Pressing play, he was met with Lucy's cold and venomous voice. "Why didn't Yara just die from her illness? If she were dead, her family's assets and Ethan would all be mine. Ethan's such an idiot. I couldn't stand my marriage anymore. But after divorcing and coming back, all I had to do was crook my finger, and he followed me like a dog." Ethan's heart sank. His hand trembled as he clutched the phone. The voice, every word of it, burned into his mind, leaving him stunned. Was that really Lucy? His thoughts spiraled into chaos, disbelief, then anger, then a deep, chilling shock, desperate for answers. He immediately ordered an investigation into Lucy's past. The hours waiting for the results felt endless. Ethan sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the phone screen as his mind replayed every moment he had trusted Lucy. Bit by bit, that trust crumbled. When the report finally came in, the truth hit him like a sledgehammer. Years ago, Lucy hadn't left him impulsively to marry the wealthy businessman. It had been a calculated move, driven by her and her mother's greed for status and luxury. She believed marrying into a wealthy family would secure her a better life. For a time, her marriage seemed perfect, but when her husband's company fell into financial trouble, Lucy ruthlessly divorced him without hesitation. Afterward, she returned to Ethan's life, determined to use him to reclaim her previous status. The report also revealed a horrifying detail. Lucy had deliberately pushed Yara into the pool, hoping she would drown. Ethan closed his eyes, images flooding his mind. Yara, struggling in the water, waiting for his rescue, and him, choosing Lucy instead. The fear and helplessness Yara must have felt overwhelmed him. He thought of how coldly he had treated her afterward, mocking her, dismissing her, and even berating her while she was ill. A wave of remorse engulfed him, chilling him to his core. "What have I done?" he muttered, his voice hoarse, filled with self-recrimination and anguish. His body began trembling uncontrollably as he gripped his phone tightly. He realized how much pain Yara had endured, and that he had been complicit, pushing her further into despair. Standing in the middle of his office, he felt utterly drained, as if every ounce of strength had been sucked from him. His gaze fell to the floor, his mind blank except for a gnawing regret. Moments later, Lucy walked in, her usual sweet smile gracing her lips. Her demeanor was confident, assured, as if nothing had changed. "Ethan, I missed you. Let's have dinner tonight. Okay?" she said, her tone laced with playful charm. Ethan didn't respond. His eyes lifted from the documents on his desk, meeting hers with a cold, distant gaze. His expression was devoid of warmth, his tone detached. Lucy froze, caught off guard. She thought he was being playful and pouted slightly, her voice tinged with complaint. "Ethan, don't be like this. Did I upset you by being late today?" Lucy asked, her voice sweet but hesitant. Ethan responded with a faint smile, but the contempt and disgust in his eyes were unmistakable. "Lucy," he said, his voice calm yet suffused with an oppressive edge, "I must have been blind to fall for someone like you." Lucy's face instantly turned pale. She hadn't expected Ethan to speak to her in such a tone. Panicking, she stammered, "Ethan, you must have heard some rumors. Those people are just jealous of our relationship. They're trying to drive a wedge between us." Ethan interrupted coldly. "A wedge? I heard your voice with my own ears, saw your actions with my own eyes. What more proof do I need?" He opened a drawer, pulled out a stack of documents, and threw them onto Lucy's lap with icy precision. Her trembling hands grabbed the papers as she stared at him in desperation. "The house you live in, the car you drive, everything you have. It's all because of me," Ethan said, his voice as cold as steel. "From today on, I'm taking it all back." Lucy clutched the documents, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Her voice cracked as she pleaded, "Ethan, you can't do this to me. We've been together for so many years. You can't be so heartless. I was forced to leave back then. I'll change. I promise I'll change." Ethan let out a bitter laugh, filled with self-mockery. "Forced? Even now, you're trying to lie to me." His gaze bore no trace of pity, only a chilling frost. "Lucy, it's time for you to face the consequences of what you've done." Few days later, Lucy discovered that her bank accounts had been frozen and her residence cleared out. The people she once relied on distanced themselves, one by one. No matter how much she begged Ethan for help, he didn't respond. Meeting with him became an impossible task. Utterly desperate, Lucy found herself wandering the streets in disgrace. One day, Ethan's car slowly passed by her as she huddled in a shadowy corner. Through the car window, Ethan's cold gaze lingered on her figure, a once familiar silhouette that now felt entirely foreign. There was no trace of sympathy in his expression. Instead, he felt a weight lifted, as though he had finally freed himself from an absurd obsession. After resolving the situation with Lucy, Ethan became consumed with finding Yara. Days passed without success, leaving him increasingly anxious. He combed through his entire contact list and pulled every string he could to locate her. Finally, his team reported back. Yara had returned to a city. Relief surged through him, but the fear in his chest only grew heavier. The thought of losing her again filled him with dread. This time, I won't let you leave, he muttered to himself. Opening a drawer, he retrieved a small ring box, his heartbeat quickening. Determination shone in his eyes, tempered by nervous anticipation. Wasting no time, he rushed to the airport. During the flight, his mind raced with scenarios of their reunion. Would Yara still be angry? Would she still hate him? He knew one thing for certain. If he lost her again, he would regret it for the rest of his life. As soon as the plane landed in a city, Ethan bolted from the cabin, driven by urgency, racing through the terminal and onto the streets. He barely noticed the passing scenery as he clenched his fists, his thoughts consumed by one name: Yara. I'm here to take you home. I won't let you be hurt anymore. Please, give me a chance, Ethan murmured to himself, his fingers unconsciously brushing against the ring box in his pocket. Before long, his car pulled up in front of the Grand Lou family venue. Guests were streaming in, their cheerful chatter and the festive atmosphere creating a stark contrast to the turmoil in his heart. For a moment, Ethan hesitated, assuming it was a wedding for someone from the Lou family he didn't know. But finding Yara was his priority. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, he walked toward the entrance. Inside, the elegant decorations and lively laughter of the guests briefly distracted him, but his focus quickly returned. He scanned the room anxiously until his eyes landed on her. Yara stood amidst the crowd in a light blue gown, her head slightly tilted as she smiled gracefully. She was standing beside Gabriel, her every gesture exuding elegance, like a stunning painting brought to life. Ethan's heart tightened. Why was she with Gabriel? Clenching his fists, he moved toward her, each step weighed down by a mixture of hope and dread. Yara noticed him almost immediately. Her expression flickered with surprise but quickly returned to calm. Ethan took a deep breath, his voice hoarse as he said, "Yara, I need to talk to you." She raised an eyebrow, giving him a cool glance. "Mr. Ethan, if there's something to say, you can say it here," she replied indifferently. Hearing her call him Mr. Ethan, he froze for a moment. The unfamiliarity in her tone and the coldness in her eyes made his words falter. "Why didn't you answer my calls? I've been looking everywhere for you. I was worried something had happened to you," he said, his desperation evident. Yara smiled faintly. "Nothing happened to me. I just finally realized it was time to go home." Her words only deepened Ethan's anxiety. He stepped closer. "Yara, I know the truth now. It was my fault. You can blame me, hate me even. But please don't leave me. Let me take care of you. Please." Gabriel, standing beside her, frowned slightly. This was the man who had shattered Yara's heart. What Ethan didn't know was that Gabriel had deliberately orchestrated events so Ethan would uncover Lucy's true colors on his own. But to Gabriel, Ethan's regret and pain were far from enough to atone for even a fraction of the harm he had caused Yara. "Mr. Ethan," Gabriel said coolly, his voice carrying a hint of icy detachment. "Today is Yara's and my engagement party. I'd appreciate it if you didn't disturb her." "Engagement party?" Ethan froze, turning to Yara in disbelief. This can't be real. You're joking, right?" Ethan shook his head, his eyes filled with anguish. "No, I know I made mistakes. Just give me another chance. Let me make it up to you. I'll spend my entire life making it up to you." Yara remained unmoved, her gaze calm and resolute. "Mr. Ethan, I don't need you to," she said evenly. Then, she slipped her arm through Gabriel's. "As you can see, I'm getting married today. If you're not here to celebrate, then perhaps you should leave now," Gabriel said with a soft but firm tone. Ethan stood frozen in place, speechless. His gaze dropped to the ring box clutched tightly in his hand. It felt as though everything he had hoped for was just a cruel dream. Gabriel turned slightly toward me, his voice gentle. "Yara," Shall we go in? The guests are waiting. I nodded without hesitation, wrapping my arm around his. Together, we walked away from the hall without looking back. Ethan's gaze lingered on our retreating figures, his heart breaking with every step we took. Pain and regret consumed him, forcing him to confront the reality of what he had lost through his own actions. Standing beneath the floral arch at my wedding, my palms felt slightly damp, not from nerves, but from the overwhelming sense of peace and contentment that seemed almost too good to be true. The guests smiled warmly at us, their expressions full of blessings and joy. I glanced up at Gabriel. The tenderness and love in his eyes made my heart tremble slightly. He gently held my arm, leaning in to ask, "Yara, are you nervous?" I couldn't help but smile, shaking my head playfully. "It feels like a dream." He chuckled, ruffling my hair affectionately. His gaze was filled with adoration. Just as the ceremony was about to begin, my eyes swept over the crowd. That's when I saw him, Ethan. The sight of him made me pause, though only for a moment. Gabriel noticed where I was looking and followed my gaze. His expression hardened instantly, and he gripped my hand tightly. "Yara," he said quietly but firmly, "today is our day. Don't let irrelevant people distract you." I nodded, smiling up at him. "Don't worry," I said, my voice calm and resolute. "I've completely moved on." Even I was surprised by how steady and peaceful I felt. Turned out that letting go could be this simple. Ethan's presence, his thoughts, his actions, none of it mattered to me anymore. Later, I heard from others that Ethan had kicked Lucy out of his life. I was mildly surprised. I had assumed they would end up together once I was gone, but it was no longer my concern. I glanced at Gabriel, who was cooking in the kitchen, and felt a deep, genuine happiness blossom within me. It wasn't until a year into our marriage that I heard about Ethan again. Gabriel mentioned it casually during dinner. Someone from the Ethan group suggested I acquire his company. "What do you think? If it bothers you, I'll drop the idea." That's when I learned that Ethan, consumed by self-destruction, had made a series of poor decisions that caused his company to decline rapidly. But even as I heard this, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no pity. It was as if those memories belonged to someone else's story. I smiled faintly. "Do whatever you think is best. The only thing I care about now is being with you." Gabriel nodded, his gaze filled with warmth and determination. "All right, I'll handle it. I won't let anything from the past trouble you again." He leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead. I rested my head against his chest and, unable to hold back, murmured, "Gabriel, I never thought I'd meet you again. You were my first love. I had a crush on you back in high school." He chuckled softly. "Silly girl. I've known all along." I looked up at him, my eyes sparkling with happiness. He leaned down, capturing my lips in a kiss full of endless tenderness. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of true happiness take root deep within my heart. The pain and entanglements of the past had finally settled, and I knew I had chosen the one who would give me the life I deserved.